Okay, so here we are. Already have some comments. Thank you, Abdelilah. Probably not pronouncing that right, but yes, thank you very much. First time I've ever had comments before the live stream started, so good job. You're the first person there. But yeah, today we have things to talk about. If there are questions, it's always about the questions. There was one thing I wanted to talk about, but I don't remember what it was right now. Let's see. Something about the rhythm lesson, I think. Hello, Rodrigo. Thank you for joining the chat. Feel free to ask questions, as always. That's why we're here. I'm trying to think of something to start off with. Oh, God, they're getting loud again. So as I posted earlier in a little status update, there's construction right outside for some reason, and this morning they were very, very loud. Hopefully it's not a problem because they're not as loud now, but hello, I'm very good. Thank you for asking. How are you? And about what are you talking? Well, I'm talking about whatever people have questions for. That's what the live streams are mainly for. It's question and answer time. But of course, I can always find something to talk about if we don't have any questions. So if you have questions, feel free to ask. Hello, Sedent. How are you? Thank you for joining us once again today. Let me know if the sounds in the background get too much. I think this mic is pretty good at keeping away background noises, but hopefully that is true. So Steve, first question, very nice. Can the turn into no? Well, off the top of my head, no. Let's see. Such as if the. Okay. Good question. I'll come back to that question, Steven. I'm pretty good, yes. So for Steve's question, the answer is no, but what you're thinking of is something that is similar. So the is never going, I hate to use never because there's some strange things that can happen, but as a general rule, for sure, 99.9% of the time, if nothing else, the is never going to turn into a because a reduces to a. And if you just say we're going to think it's a. But there are some interesting things that happen where it's not that the turns into but there's something else that you might not be hearing that is going on or that can go on. So with the example, if the, okay, that is never going to be if a, because if you say if a, that's going to be if a. That's the only way that that can be interpreted. Okay. With now you could potentially do a dental D for the voiced th and the if the but we'd have to hear that dental D, okay, instead of saying if the with a nice solid th. So that's the only thing that's possible there. It's not dropping the th, it's just making it a dental D. With getting the, this is a similar case where there's getting the when we have n plus th, this is a linking rule, okay? And I think I might have talked about this a little bit in the n lesson, the mn lesson, but with n plus th, now remember getting, so depending on who you ask, right, the way I pronounce getting is with in at the end, right? But other speakers will use ing with the in the back. If you use that back and you say getting the, The only thing that you can do with that th, you can either say it as a th or you can do a dental d. Getting the, okay? You can't drop it. If you say getting that is going to mean getting a. Okay. However, if you say getting with the e plus regular n, the way that I talk, then you can still do that dental th, but you don't have to be as strong with the d part, because we're going to modify the n. Instead of putting the n up here, we'll put the n here, and then we just kind of peel off the tongue position. There might be a little burst of air for that dental d sound, but it doesn't have to be like getting the. It could be like getting the, n. So this is important because to a native speaker's ears, most natives don't realize this. If you do a regular n, getting, and then you go into it's going to sound like getting a. If you do a modified dental n and pull it off without actually pushing out a dental d, a native speaker's ears is going to interpret that slightly different position as a th being there, even though there's no th. So what you're hearing is a dropped th, but it's actually not a dropped th. It's because we're modifying the n. If you don't modify the n and make it dental in this case, then it's going to be interpreted as a, not the. Okay. This is a very, very important and interesting point that a lot of learners have trouble with or just don't know about. With at and the, we can say at the. Now here what we're doing is just like we can modify the n to be dental in getting and say the, getting the, you could do the same thing here. You can, instead of doing a t here, at and then the, you can just place the t dental, even though it doesn't actually exist, right? And you're not going to push it out and say at the, that's not it. It sort of blends into one thing, at the. So you stop the T here, you end the position here, but then when you push out that dental D for the TH, it's just already in position for the dental. So it sort of becomes like one thing. At the. So it's not atta. If you say atta, again, that is going to be interpreted as at a, because the only way it can flap is if that T connects to a vowel. Okay. If it's T and TH, there's no ability to flap because we don't have the conditions to make a flapped D sound. Okay. Good. Very, very good questions. If anybody has any follow-up questions related to that, definitely feel free to ask. There are no stupid questions. You can ask me to re-explain things. That is perfectly fine. To Sedent, how's it going with your One Punch Man thing? So. So I know this is going to sound lame, like a cop-out or something. I'm still not up to the 6 mile run. I'm up to about 2 miles, and I can really feel that in my calves. So I was gonna do the One Punch Man is pushes, push-ups, sit-ups, squats, and the run. So a 2 mile run instead of a 6 mile run is where I'm at so far. The push-ups, I can do the 100 push-ups doing drop set. I'm experimenting with some things, but the pulls and the sit-ups aren't happening. They're just not happening. It's a mental thing. But the pulls, usually I do the 100, yeah. So it's coming. It's coming along. My main problem is my back is so super weak, like really, really weak. It's like the weakest thing that I have. And before I couldn't even really like feel my back muscles really. Now I can start to feel my lats, which are these muscles right here. And That helps a lot. But I also don't have a good setup for a pull-up bar. I have a doorway pull-up bar, but none of the doors in this house are wide enough for the like full pull-up grip. So I'm going to be getting a pull-up bar that I'm going to install outside um, and actually be able to do actual pull-ups. But yes, so it's coming along. I'm exercising, I'm moving in the general direction, but I don't always hit 100% of everything, especially because it seems, I hate to admit it, but because I'm generally out of shape and because I'm 31, those two factors, I kind of have to work into getting into shape a bit. I don't like using age as an excuse because I think it's used way too much as a cop out. But based on the feedback my body is giving me, I want to make sure I don't push too hard. So I'm, giving some recovery, and I'm basically doing like One Punch Man every other day, more or less. So I'm moving into the full workout. um, okay. Anyway, so Abdelilah, I don't know how to say your name. That's like the easiest way for me to say it. Abdelilah. I don't know. I'll call you Mr. Sa. How about that, Mr. Sa? So you say you have a very good question. I assume that's going to be in the second one. Second thing that you, yeah, let's see. Linguistic question. Okay, so this is your question. By the end of 2021, I will have, with a V, will have graduated from the university, and as you know, I'm a university English student, and my major is linguistics with an S at the end. Which one is better, linguistics or literature? That is completely up to you. It depends on what you want to do. Linguistics is going to be more of a science. I started a linguistics degree, but I didn't realize how much technical sciencey type stuff was involved, because like I have nothing against science. Science is great, but when it comes to very, very detailed, like breaking sentences into word trees and stuff, it's a bit too boring for me. So linguistics, if you are more interested in science and analyzing the way that language works, like the nature of language, which there's different fields. There's phonology and pronunciation. There's, the grammar and all kinds of different things within linguistics. But if you want more of a scientific type of approach to language and how language works itself, linguistics would be a good option. If you are much more interested in the humanities, what we call in English the humanities, like literature, um, maybe philosophy, art, that type of thing, rather than more of the sciencey stuff, literature, a degree in literature is going to be much like a lot more reading, a lot of reading of texts, like classic texts from classic English writers, some modern English writers, I'm sure also, but you're going to be reading probably a lot of like, I don't know, I don't even know English literature, Charles Dickens, I can't think of anybody right now. I'm trying to think of who wrote Jane Austen, probably. And you're actually going to find language that people don't use anymore. Because a lot of the great English literature that people still talk a lot about is from like the 1800s, 1900s, early 1900s. And so some of the language is, it's not the way that people actually speak anymore. So it depends on what you want. Depends on what you want. I can't say which one is better because that completely depends on you. But Unknown says personally chose literature but not English. It's basically that you have to love reading. Yeah, exactly. reading. I would never get like I love language. I would never get a degree in English literature because I don't want to spend 24 hours a day reading texts from 200 years ago. Why I chose linguistics, because my research would be about Chomsky. I love Chomsky, especially Chomsky's political work, but that's a completely different topic. I'm a very big fan of Chomsky's work in linguistics, especially his idea of I can't think of anything today. The grammar module in the brain, or whatever it's called. I forget what he calls it, but that explains how like the babies acquire the grammar of their language and all that. It's very, very interesting. Also has some potential application crossover to music, but that's a completely different topic also. Anyway, so okay, make sure I don't miss anything here. Unknown says hi. Yes, hi. Thank you for joining us again today. I hope that everything is well on your end. Sedent, I see why you are wearing a Superman t-shirt. Why am I wearing a Superman t-shirt? Because it's very fitting and slimming on me. Or because you can see my tattoo, my cool tattoo. Yeah. Anyway, let's see. So Steve, is there some way of linking, which by the way, this looks, I probably need to raise my chair. There we go. See, that's even better. Now you can see the whole symbol. Is there some way of linking with another word starting with a vowel? Well, not only is there some way, but that is what naturally happens. You have to understand that, especially in American English, as much as possible, generally speaking, of course, there's different ways that you can manipulate the rhythm or the enunciation, right? Usually we use enunciation as a tool, but generally through the normal speech of the language, especially in faster speech, we want to make things flow as smoothly as possible. That's one reason why we get a lot of the changes, like the flap D and stuff, because it makes it easier and faster to flow. Okay, American English is a very lazy it has a very lazy pronunciation. We'll say that English in general, but especially American English. So I actually talked about linking to vowels. I call it, which number is it? Exception number, well, exception, it's not actually an exception, but exception number 3 in the 4 big exceptions to the 4 general rules, which I have, those are 2 whole lessons that I have in the pronunciation course that you can look up. But what happens is, remember, is a vowel and is a consonant. Now, depending on the dialect, these might be pronounced slightly differently. The way that I speak and the way that I hear everybody speaking American English is just It's the same exact sound, 100% same exact sound. There's no need to make it any different. The only real difference is that the vowel is relatively very slightly longer. Okay, so we don't say run, we say run. It's a nice short R. But if we say water, okay, it's not water, it's water. Okay, so it's going to be not super long compared to the consonant, but just a little bit longer. Okay, now, if you have, let's see, what's the example you gave here? We're all, I think, right? Okay. Now, I also see you trying to flap a D. That is a very common mistake based on false perception. Okay, so if we say were and all, if your language uses tapped R's like da, then you're going to have a natural desire to say like wural, or something like that. There's no tap here. It's impossible in English because R's are never tapped. An R is never going to turn into a flapped D or a tapped R. It doesn't exist in English. Okay, so there's no possibility for a flap here at all. That's the first point. Second point, this vowel, so it's spelled E-R-E in this particular case. It doesn't matter. It's just It's W sound plus the vowel sound, Now, the vowel, because it's the same sound as the consonant, if the next sound after it is a vowel sound, the number 1 general rule of the entire language that happens more often than any other linking rule is that consonants connect to vowels between words. Okay, consonant sounds will connect to vowel sounds between words. Always, 100% of the time. Now, because is a vowel and a consonant, in the word were, it's a vowel, but that is just going to open up into right? Well, the L-colored all, which is a vowel. And so what happens is it's as if that vowel also becomes a consonant at the same time when it links over. But this is what I call a bridge sound, because many times when we have a normal, not a special blend, just a normal like consonant to vowel link, like if I say, I don't know, was it, it's going to sound like the Z spelled with an S, it's a Z. It's going to sound like the Z sort of attaches over to the next word. Was it. Where and this is a very small thing, it's just a way to think about it, okay? There are some sounds, like the and I think also the S, that it sounds, when we get a connection like this, it doesn't quite sound like it completely breaks off. It sounds more like it's attached to both at the same time, and it's just in the middle. And so it's like a bridge, and that's exactly what the does when there's a vowel after it. So, because general rule 2 is that vowels don't connect to vowels. But this is why it's an exception, because actually you can activate that vowel into a consonant and connect it to but I hope you see what I mean there. Like it sounds kind of complicated in the explanation, but it's very, very simple. It's just because it's the same sound, it just connects, right? Even though it's actually a vowel, in this particular case. So we're all. That's it. So another good question, yeah. Now you also tried, really quick before we leave this point, you also tried to reduce the to right? You said like what all, and that would be interpreted as what all, because what is then we have the T, that T would turn into a flap D and move over to what all. So that's going to be a completely different word if you try to say what. Okay, I don't want to say can't. There are special cases where you can reduce an to an to a schwa sound, but generally speaking, does not reduce to a schwa sound. Especially because is another type of reduction sound for like the R-colored vowels, like how or commonly just is pronounced . So yeah, that's a different topic. Okay, so sedent, how to pronounce explanatory, like that. Explanatory. So the explanatory, it has two stresses, primary stresses on explanatory. Secondary stresses on the tor. That first syllable, fully enunciated, is X with the third vowel, It will commonly reduce to either the second vowel, or explanatory. Maybe not That seems kind of weird. Maybe in non-Western General American. I'll double check what the dictionary says. Because sounds a little weird to me, but for sure. Let's see here. Explanatory. There's one thing that the dictionary is somewhat useful for in terms of pronunciation. It's aside from marking stress, it's to know what is in non-Western General American. Yeah, so it says ick. So it's going to be the second vowel, reduced to the second vowel. But anyway, so no schwa there, but pla, that's fourth vowel, If you don't know what I mean by the numbers, I'm talking about the vowel chart. You can download a link to that, or there's a link to download that in the description to my website in the download section. So that's a schwa sound in the second A. Explana could also be explane. That's fine. Explanatory, doesn't matter. Same thing. Now notice that this T is not flapping. Why? because it's stressed. It has secondary stress. It doesn't sound as high as pla, right? And so you might think, well, plan is clearly stressed, so that should be a flap D. But no, it gets the secondary stress. And remember, one of the requirements to be able to flap a T or a D is that it has to be at the start of an unstressed syllable. But here is not an unstressed syllable. Okay, explanatory, explanatory. And then the tor explanatory. Because it's stressed, we're not reducing it to ter. If I say explanatory, it sounds kind of weird. Okay, so we can't really reduce it to it has to stay or. And then, of course, we have the E sound at the end. It's spelled with a Y, but that just means it's the E sound in this case. Okay, excellent question. Unknown, I have a question. Is it pronunciation changes drastically? Yeah, I'm actually, the way that I would naturally be inclined to say this word is lambast. Lambast. Let's see what the dictionary has to say on this weird one. Yeah, so lamb. Okay, so it says the stress is the same. You can optionally spell it with an E. One is lambast with a, and the other is like lambaste with the A diphthong, lambaste. I've never heard it pronounced lambaste. That sounds kind of weird to me. That might be more of a British pronunciation, I guess. And in fact, sometimes when you see random silent E's, not normally, we have a lot of random silent E's that indicate spelling or pronunciation changes, like cat, Kate, with a silent E, it turns into A, which is why lambast would turn into lambaste with silent E. But there are quite a few words like, I can't think of one right now. They always stand out to me when I see them, but I can never remember them. There's a group of words, a handful of words that in British English have a silent E at the end, but in American English don't have a silent E at the end. And they're generally pronounced the same between the two. It's just the British version has a silent E. So I don't know, but I would definitely say lambast for sure. That's how I would pronounce it. And you could just pick one, right? If there's two different pronunciations, if they're both American, you can pick one. But I would use the ah sound in the in both syllables, but especially that second syllable. Okay. Abdullah. Oh yeah, with my Superman shirt because I've been working out. Well, I have been, yeah, but I just know I found the shirt actually because for those of you who don't know, I also have a second business right now, which is selling on eBay, and I was out looking for shirts and stuff to sell or whatever, and I found this shirt and I was going to sell it, but I was like, this is a really cool shirt and I like how it fits on me, so I'm going to keep it. So yeah, even if I haven't been working out, I'd still wear this shirt. I like the shirt, but it is very I don't know, fitting, we'll say. Fits well. Yeah, I do linguistics so much. Okay, everything related to part speech and stuff like that. Yeah, some people love that stuff, and it can be very, very interesting and very useful potentially. But I was never too much into that. Like, I need some of that background knowledge to help me filter the technical jargon and teach you guys in a way that's a lot easier to understand. But for the most part, like, I'm just like, I don't really care about that. And I don't know, it's too technical and sciencey for my brain. I'm not a native of English. My own is Arabic, but I prefer English than any other language. Oh, cool. Very nice. By the way, I don't remember if an Arabic speaker has contacted me. Oh, maybe. Maybe. I don't know. I might need an Arabic speaker for an upcoming lesson. If so, I'll contact you. I'll leave a message on one of the comments that we were talking through earlier. But I've been loving linguistics since I was in high school, and when I moved to the university, I got the first grade in spoken 19. Wait, what? for screen. That doesn't make much sense. From that time, my professor told me, "Choose to study linguistics." Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, as long as you love it, that's great. If a teacher just tells you, you're like, hey, you should maybe try to do this because you have like you have some skill here or whatever. It's like maybe that's something you might want to do if you like it. It seems like you do like it, so that's good, perfect. Do that. But it always comes down to what you like. Any rules for pronouncing words that end with tiv? I always have a hard time trying to figure out what the stress syllable is in words like administrative. Okay, here is the secret key. The secret key, the secret key, the secret key. I don't know if you've seen my 2 big lessons on word stress. They're next to each other. I have like 3 lessons on word stress right now, but there's 2 together. One talks about it's like the 5 rules that the only 5 rules you'll ever need for word stress, and the other one is like a practice application video for that. That gives you lots and lots of examples, and you just kind of have to like listen and let your brain bathe in the stress. Are there any rules for how should you stress or how you pronounce tive ending? Probably. There are also probably exceptions to that. Even if there were no exceptions ever, there are so many different potential rules and things when it comes to stress that I very, very, very strongly recommend beyond the basics, like the main 5 rules that are actually kind of useful. You completely ignore rules. Don't try to learn rules for word stress, okay? Because even if you manage to memorize all these rules and you're like, okay, I know this is this and this and this and this, it's not going to help your speaking very much. And if it does, it's going to take a very long time. It's kind of like grammar. It's like, oh yeah, okay. As you're trying to speak, you're trying to remember how do I conjugate this word, or what's the grammar here, right? And it slows you down. It's going to be the same effect. You're like, okay, wait, how do I stress that word again before I say it? Or you repeat it, after it's like, oh, okay. And it's all part of the process, right? You can make mistakes. It's fine, but it's going to slow you down, right? Because it's knowledge. You want the skill. And generally speaking, it's much better to approach skill building through feeling and repetition of actual practice rather than memorizing of knowledge. Some of the knowledge is useful, yes, but this is not useful knowledge. Okay, so it doesn't matter if there's any rules here. What you want to do, right? If this is there's a general way to do this, and then there's a targeted way to do this, and you should probably do both. The general way is what I tried to do in my big stress practice lesson, where there were just many examples. You could see the stress, you hear it, and it's just like 20 minutes or so of many different stress words that follow similar patterns, and you start to be able to build a feeling for how it sounds. That's generally for the language. What you can do here, if you want, you can find a bunch of words that end in tive. Sometimes maybe the pronunciation will change. Like maybe sometimes it's tiv, sometimes it's tive. Who knows? I think usually it's tiv. That sounds about right. But whether it's stressed or not, well, find a bunch of words that end in that, and then just listen to them over and over and over again. Okay. And you're going to start to build a feeling probably pretty quickly if you're targeting just this one ending. You're going to start to very quickly build a feeling for what it's supposed to be. Now, if there are exceptions, like let's say the tiv is never stressed, but there's a couple words where it is, and those are the exceptions, then you can just memorize those cases, right? And by listening to them over and over again, especially in contrast to the ones where it's usually not stressed, if that's the case, then those are going to stand out better, and you're going to remember how to say those particular words. So that is a much better, more effective, and easier way to get this into your brain and to feel it rather than trying to memorize the rules. So that's my advice. Not everybody likes my advice, but that's my advice. But some example words, right? Like you said, administrative. administrative, which there's a couple ways to say it. Administrative, that's another way to say it, but administrative, attentive, intensive. Wait, intensive, no, that's a different one. That's civ, not tiv. Attentive, can't even think. Now I'm thinking of S ones too, like dismissive. Because a lot of these, whether it's like tiv or civ or whatever, a lot of them are going to still follow the same stress pattern too. And that's something else that you'll find, like dismissive, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to follow that same stress. So, um, and then you'll actually start to build a feeling for those general types of words, especially if they're like 3 syllables: attentive, dismissive, intensive, right? They're all following the same pattern. But of course, there's going to be words that don't follow those patterns. So that's what I would recommend, yes. You are welcome. As for where you can find the audio for these words to listen to, one really good site that I've mentioned before is forvo.com. You won't always get super great recordings from there, but it does tell you where the speaker is from, like if they're from the UK or the US or whatever. And in my experience, usually the recordings are pretty good. So that's one place you can get them instead of just like the robot voice in the dictionary. You don't want that so much. Okay, Steve, I didn't really get it. Is it like turn into a vowel and consonant at the same time? It seems like kind of like plus flap D, but I think I know what you mean. Yeah. So again, if there is no T or D after the which it is possible because is a vowel. So if you have vowel and then say the next word starts in a weak T and the next sound is a vowel, let's see, like, well, that'd be very messy speech. Maybe not in that case. It'd have to maybe be inside of a word. I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but if there's no presence of a T or a D, right, a T sound or a D sound, because the only things that flap in English potentially are the T and the D. Okay, if you do not see a T or a D, if there's just an plus a vowel, it is impossible to make a flap D in English. It's never going to happen at least in American English, specifically, especially in General American and Western General American. So that's one point I want you to get out of your head. Maybe you're perceiving it like there's a flap D there somewhere. Maybe either your ears are playing tricks on you, or perhaps the source that you're listening to. Like, I know you listen to a lot of rap music, so perhaps in that particular enunciation, that's something they do, but that is not normal. That's not standard. Okay, so don't let that trick you, because most Americans would never do that. Okay. So that point aside, yes, as I was saying, the vowel and the consonant are the exact same sound. Not in all dialects, but in the way that I speak and the way that you can speak and still sound perfectly natural is to make them the exact same sound. You don't have to change them in any way. Okay. The only slight difference is that the vowel is very, very relatively slightly longer. Okay. So, because they're the same sound, consonants connect to vowels. That's the number one general rule of the whole language. Is a consonant and simultaneously a vowel at the same time. Okay, it just depends really on the length. So it doesn't matter if you have an vowel, which is slightly longer, and then you have another vowel at the start of the next word, like we're all. Okay, the vowel, it's going to start as a vowel, but then it's going to activate into a consonant and connect over. It's one way to look at it. If it's confusing, you don't have to look at it that way. Okay, but because consonants connect to vowels, the presence of an sound is going to connect to a vowel after it, right? It just so happens in the case of which is why it's an exception, that because it's the same sound, it doesn't really matter if it's a consonant or a vowel. If there's a vowel after it, it's going to connect as if it were a consonant. You can maybe think of it that way, and that might make more sense. If that still doesn't make sense, again, feel free to let me know. I can think of other ways to maybe try to explain it. Sometimes things take uh, different ways of explaining. Um, and never be afraid to look stupid because you don't get it. It's fine. It could be me. Maybe my explanation is not good. um, so, Infamous Infinity, welcome to the chat. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. So, learning in an unconscious way by instinct works much better than learning the rules and applying them. Ooh, okay. We need to talk about that contraction. You cannot contract. This is not they are. There's not there so much exceptions. There. Um, you can maybe do this. We would never write this. In speech, we can say this, there, and reduce the ah part, but we would never write that. But it's not they. That's yeah, there we go. I figured it was a typo, but these are little things that English learners make mistakes with, and I want to make sure everybody's clear on that. But yeah, so there are so many exceptions that I don't know how someone can learn by rules first. Yeah, so many exceptions. Very good. Sorry. Good. And Steve got it. Very nice. Exactly. Which is, again, I've been talking a lot about pronunciation. And so far, we've talked a lot about basic sounds, right? Which is very mechanical, very like, okay, where do you put your tongue? Where do you put whatever? And so it's much more about the physical reproduction rather than like rules necessarily. But some rules are useful. If you approach pronunciation rules and especially grammar rules with the 80-20 approach, right, you're going to get the most beneficial, highest level things, right? Like, say, in grammar, obviously, if you understand the idea of tenses, right, present, past, future, okay, that helps a lot. If you don't really, usually we don't consciously think about that until we start learning language, like consciously trying to learn another language, and we're like, oh yeah, there's this thing called the present tense, and it's when we talk about things in the present, and it helps make us conscious of those things, which is useful. And then, okay, in English, this is how it works. In Spanish, this is how it works. Whatever. Some basic rules are really, really useful. But for the most part, yes, exactly. You want to try to feel the language. And that comes with a lot of listening, a lot of input, but also with my sort of hacking approaches, like the logic of prepositions. It's all based on, even if it's not actually logical, it's based on using logic to try to find the feeling that underlies each preposition. Because in English, I can tell you as a native speaker, every preposition has a particular feeling, which is why, and every word really has a particular feeling. But that's why if I say, I don't know, what's at the TV instead of what's on the TV, it's going to feel weird. It's not just wrong. It doesn't just sound wrong. It feels weird. Right. And so that wouldn't come out of my mouth because the feeling isn't there to create what comes out. Right. When we're speaking languages, we really are just trying to express what we're thinking and feeling so fast and subconsciously that there's no time for rules. Of course, there's a practice period. You have to practice. You have to make your mistakes. That's fine, especially in the early days. But you want to try to build a feeling rather than memorizing a bunch of rules. So, because again, there's the biggest mistake that a lot of people make in any skill is mistaking knowledge for skill. And yes, you do have to have, well, you don't have to necessarily, it depends. Like, you don't have to learn any grammar. You can still learn a language, but it helps to know a little bit of grammar. It makes it easier. But knowing something doesn't translate into skill. That's a mistake people make. Oh, if I just have more vocabulary, if I just have more grammar, I'll be ready to speak. Like, no, speaking is its own skill. You have to go and speak. And you can do that straight from day one if you want. You can do that, straight from day 366, after 1 year of input. It doesn't matter. But anyway, I digress. So I think I'm caught up. Yay, we're caught up. Steve, yes, perfect timing. Interchangeable. Go crazy and drive someone crazy and get crazy. Not quite. They're related. Obviously, we're using crazy. So to go crazy, this is a good question. Go crazy is just the basic statement, like you lose your sanity, right? There's many ways to say this. You go mad. A little bit more of a British expression. We use it too, but to go mad, to go crazy, to lose your mind, which that can also be used in a slightly different way. But you know, you're not all there. Okay, you go crazy, and that could be applied in a not literal way, right? But usually, it's somebody is there's something a little off with their brain, and whatever. Okay, and that's fine, whatever. But to drive someone crazy, now notice you had to put the someone, right? Because we need the someone there. Drive me crazy, drive him crazy, whatever. So to drive someone crazy, this is the same thing, but from a different perspective. So if you drive me crazy, then I go crazy because of you, right? It's just looking at it from a different angle. So they're not really interchangeable in the sense that the subject will change, right? Who's doing the craziness? Am I going crazy, or is somebody driving me crazy? Now, of course, drive someone crazy can also be used in a romantic way, right? Like if you're just like you're so into this person, you're just like so in love with them, like oh they're so amazing, like they drive you crazy. That's another way we can use it, and it doesn't actually mean like mentally you're losing your mind. Um, or you're losing your sanity or anything. So there are applications that are context specific, but that's the basic idea. To get crazy, get is its own little world that I will definitely be talking about later on the channel. But get crazy. So in this case, this is one of the cases where get is providing what we would call in grammar a reflexive use. Okay, remember, English does not have an inherent reflexive structure, and reflexive just means it goes back to the subject. So if I don't know, say I'm cutting potatoes or whatever, and I accidentally slice my finger, right? I cut myself. Okay, so we have words that's very loud. We have words like myself that can point it back to the doer of the action. That's reflexive, like a mirror. I see my reflection. Um, but English doesn't have an inherent structure like some other languages do. We have different ways that we do that. Get, not all uses of get are reflexive, but get is one of the ways that we create reflexiveness in English. And when in get crazy, this is actually a reflexive use. So it's actually would be back on myself. But get crazy does not mean losing your sanity. Okay. Crazy actually has quite a few meanings. The basic meaning is like a lack of sanity, right? You're not healthy mentally, whatever it is, which saying someone is crazy because they have a mental issue is a bit extreme. It's definitely not PC, politically correct for sure. Usually we reserve crazy for like a very intense case, like somebody is, really hallucinating and delusional and all this stuff. But get crazy, this use of crazy is usually not used that way. It's a little bit different. This means, like, say, if you go to a party, right? You say the party got crazy, or we got crazy at the party. That means that the party was like, there's so much going on, right? Like everybody's drinking, everybody's having fun, everybody's loud and dancing and all this stuff. It's just like chaos. There's just so much going on. We can say like it's crazy, right? It's chaotic. So that's another use of crazy. And with get crazy, that's what we would mean. Of course, there's different contexts. I might not be thinking of all the context, but that's what comes to mind with get crazy. So I hope that makes sense. But these three are definitely not interchangeable. The first two are very, very closely related. The third one is a little bit different, but obviously underneath the surface is going to be related because of the same word crazy. Okay, unknown. This is not a question. Well, fine. Don't ask a question. No, this is not a question, but I've been seeing a lot of making nouns, verbs, scenes. That sounds very interesting. A gaming streamer literally said, I see. Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I'm a janitize this place. um, I find these useful, kind of growing on me. Yeah. This is something that is definitely possible in English. We have the inherent structure to do this. Um, I have noticed that, um, say over the last 20 years or so, 15, 20 years, especially the last 10 years, it may be something that is becoming a little bit more widespread to more contexts. Um, with verbs that we normally wouldn't necessarily use, but there's nothing wrong with it. So to janitize, right, eyes is one way that we make a noun into a verb. Now the noun here would be janitor, right? Somebody who cleans, the hospital or the school or whatever. They do all the mopping and keep things clean, right? They're the janitor. So if you say I'm a janitize, I'm a is I'm going to. It's an extreme spoken contraction. You're never supposed to write IMMA, but informally we can. It's not a problem. But I'm going to janitize this place. So I'm going to become a janitor to clean this place. Like not literally, but that's the idea. I'm going to clean this place. That's what he's saying. So it's exactly the same as saying I'm going to clean this place. I'm a janitize this place. Um, Now, if you can understand that eyes, like unknown very clearly seems to understand, if you understand that eyes can make verbs and you see weird things like this, you can understand them a lot better, right? This is actually something called word formation. And it's part of a concept called word families, which is a very powerful tool to help learn languages. I'm going to talk more about word families in the future, but um, when you learn a word family, right, like run, runner, running, I don't know. I can't think of any other ones. There's some that like they can you can change categories. That's what a word family is. You have like the noun version, the verb version, the adjective version, the adverb version, and they won't always have a version for every single thing. Some words do, some words don't, and sometimes there are multiple of the same one. Like I don't know, a I'm just horrible at examples today. Um, so you can go for a walk, right? Which is another way to say walk. I'm going to walk around, right? You can go for a walk. So in that case, walk is a noun, even though it looks like the verb. Or you can say, I am a walker, right? I walk a lot. So I'm a walker. So two different types of nouns, right? One uses the ER ending, which commonly makes a verb into a noun. And sometimes we can use verbs directly as nouns, like in the case of a walk. So very, very interesting and useful. I know it's a little bit, I widened the scope from what Unknown said there, but yes, um, that's a very good insight and a very good comment there. So other people can also look out for that. Infamous infinity. I love the expression "drive me nuts." We don't this kind of so we don't use this kind of expression here. Um, yeah. By the way, infamous. You don't have to say if you don't want to, but what is your language? um, just for reference. That also helps me with how I answer things because I do know a little bit about some languages. But yeah, drive me nuts. For those of you who don't know, drive me nuts. Nuts is a synonym, a potential synonym for crazy. Um, so yeah, Yuko. Hi, thank you for your video. Always, I'm confused about. I'm worried and I worry. Okay, good question. Good question. Thank you for joining the chat and asking the question. I know it took me a second. I apologize for that, but I'm worried and I worry. So it depends on what you're saying. It depends on what you're saying. If you say I'm worried, okay, think about this logically. You're saying you're using to be, okay, which is a state. It's a stative verb, as we say. So I am a teacher. That is my state. Okay, that's my job, my role. Or I am happy. Okay, right now I'm happy. Later I'll be sad. Because it's going to happen eventually. So that's my current state. So if you say I am worried, you're in the state of worry. Okay. It's kind of like the ing, like I am worrying, but instead of the ing form, we're using that ed ending to make it more of an adjective. I'm worried. Okay. So I feel worried, basically. If you say I worry, this is not a state. This is worry as a verb, which isn't, it's not a stative verb. It's an actual action verb, right? To worry about something. And if you say I worry, that is going to sound more like it's you're not in the state, but that you usually worry, right? Because if you describe yourself with the adjective worried, you are feeling that right now. I am worried. But if you say I worry, the present tense, which can be used for quite a few things, but the basics of the present tense, present simple tense, is to talk about something that is generally true, like the sun is hot, or something that is habitually true. Maybe it's not constantly true, like the sun is hot, but it's habitually true, like I wake up every morning at 6. Okay. So it's like a habit every single day that happens. Da, 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 da. So I worry sounds like a general statement, not that you're worried now, but that you tend to worry. You have the habit of worrying about things. Okay. So that would be the difference, being in the state versus having the general habit of worry. I hope that makes sense. But that's why this difference in grammar exists. Okay, that's the other thing about the rules is grammar is a description of the way language is used, but the way language is used is not because of the grammar. It's not because of the rules. The rules just describe how we use the language, but the reason why we use the language that way is because of how it feels, right? That's underneath the rules. The rules are just descriptions of how it feels. So anyway, you're welcome. Glad to help. Rodrigo, Josh, in the description, I read the site also lets you do writing exchanges. Is that correct? That's a perfectly fine sentence. Yeah. Yeah, you can do writing exchanges. You could also say written exchanges. It doesn't really matter. Oftentimes, there's more than one way to say the same thing. But yeah, that's a perfectly fine sentence. I have to become half. This is also a good question. Yeah. So have becoming an F before to. Does it happen linking other words with the same pattern? So yeah, we talked a bit about this a couple weeks ago, I think. You might have not been there, or you might have like already left or something. So and I just see now, yeah, Infamous is from Brazil and he speaks Portuguese. Yes, welcome to the club because apparently half of my viewers are from Brazil. So, muito bom. Now, have to becoming have to. So first for this particular combination, and then we'll talk about does it happen elsewhere. So have to equals have to. And you're writing it with an A, the T with an A. That's a common way that we might spell it, have to with an A at the end, but it's pronounced as a schwa. So I would write it UH to be a little more accurate, right? Which of course, if I'm going to do that, I might as well do this half to. It actually be kind of like that, have to. But anyway, the point here is this is a special case, okay? 99% of the time, in fact, 99.99999% of the time, the changes that happen because of linking or because of sounds that are close to each other, blending, whatever, it has to do with going from left to right with the flow of the sentence. So this sound plus this sound after it will blend or maybe cause the sound to disappear or will, whatever happens. Okay. This is one of the rare cases where it actually goes backwards because have, the V is voiced, right? V is voiced. meaning we vibrate our vocal cords. Now, the voiceless version of F with no vibration of vocal cord of F, see, I gave the answer away. The voiceless version of V, where we don't vibrate, we just use air, is the F sound. Right? It's voiceless, no voice. So, normally what would happen, you would expect maybe the voiced V would change the T into a D, because D is the voice version of T. And many times, that's what's going to happen. If we say go to, this will more often than not, 80, 90% of the time, become go, not go, go duh with a flat D, go to. And this is also kind of a special case because usually that doesn't happen to a T at the start, but the preposition to, that T is very, very weak. There's all kinds of weird things that can happen. But the voiced O, all vowels are voiced. Okay, all vowels are voiced. So the voice from the O is affecting that really weak T in to, that especially weak T, and it actually becomes a flat D very commonly. It doesn't have to, but it very commonly does. Go to. That's with the flow of the sentence. But here, with have to, we're actually seeing the voicelessness of the T change the V into an F. And again, this is a very, 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 very special case. All right. And part of the reason why this is existing at all, why it even exists in the first place, is because have and to is a very, very, very common combination, right? We use that all the time. I also think that the reason why it's changing backwards in this case is because saying have to is a lot easier than saying have to. Which actually sometimes you probably will hear have to. Now that I think about it, that is possible, but usually it's going to be have to. I have to go. So know that it is definitely a special case. Okay, it is a special case. So it doesn't necessarily have applications for the wider language, but there is at least one other case where this can happen, which is of course. Now that of in, or the F in of, is spelled with an F, but it's a V sound. Of, okay? But the k in course is voiceless. And again, this is an extremely common group of words, collocation, two words, in this case, two words together. And so we're actually going to say, you can say of course, and that's fine, but you will hear people say of course, and they'll sort of drop that voice on the F and just flow into the voicelessness of the K. Of course. So that's another special case where this can happen sort of backwards. Okay, there might be some other cases, but again, it's one of the biggest reasons is because these words are so commonly found together. If you just have two random words like that are together, it's not going to work because they don't commonly go together. Things don't usually go backwards that way. So that's a prerequisite. They have to be the two words that would very, very commonly go together. And then outside of that, it kind of depends. So special case, again, special case. Bananas. What? Unknown says also bananas. What were we talking about? Because we were talking about Janitize the place. I don't know. I don't know where the bananas came from. But yeah, Steve. Yeah, my soul. BR. Oh yeah, Brazil. Yeah, Brazilian. I know. It's funny. And then Infamous retracted the message. That's fine. You can do that if you want. Okay, Yuko. I noticed that when people say all of, some of, it sounds like all of, some of. Okay, this is an interesting point. Yeah. If it's more fully enunciated, so all of is going to be more like all, because of, the L is going to connect over, which actually you can keep it a half L, a dark L, and just sort of flow. Olive, that's one way to do it, but you can activate that L and say olive. Okay, that would be like the really clear enunciated way. Now, can we just kind of drop that schwa sound in of and say alv, like all of the people, all of the people. Yes. Okay. In isolation, we're not going to pick it out and say, oh, all of or alv. It sounds weird in isolation, but if you're speaking and you're speaking pretty quickly, that is a reduction that can happen where we sort of create. I guess it's actually not a syllabic consonant because it kind of just goes at the end of alv or at the end of all in this case. But yeah, you can sort of eat that schwa. With some of, okay, so this would normally be some of, some. Hello, Gabriel. Yes, you're a little bit late, but that's okay. Just an hour. Another Brazilian person in the chat. um, some of, some of. Okay, so the M would connect over ma, some of. Okay. Can we say some? I don't know. Let's see. Some of the people. Some of the people. Yes. Now, what's more commonly going to happen of, okay, it's that schwa sound, spelled with an O, but it's just okay, it's not O or ah or anything, it's O, or sorry, That F, spelled with an F, it's a V. Okay, we know that. But very, very commonly, 9 times out of 10, most of the time, we're not going to enunciate that V sound and it's just going to drop. This is why we say, well, one reason why we say kinda, right? But we do that elsewhere, right? So we can say Allah instead of olive or alv. Much more commonly than alv and much more standard would be Allah, where we drop the V sound. Or with some of, some of the people, some of the time. I do it some of the time. So that is what I would encourage you to focus on, would actually be dropping the V and keeping the schwa. But it is possible with these particular cases, in the flow of normal fast speech, to actually drop the schwa and keep the V. That will happen sometimes. It's okay. It's a strange one, but it can happen. Yes. Trust says, tell more about schwa. I mean, how to pronounce the sound, more ways to do it. Okay, good. And then a retracted message. So, Trust, first I want to ask, have you seen my main lesson about the schwa sound, and have you seen my lesson about the truth about the schwa sound? Just so I know what you have seen and what you haven't seen and where I have to start. So let me know about that first. Rodrigo, if I wrote, for example, the site also lets, instead of let's, you do, right? Would that still be correct? Oh, okay. No. Wait, hold on. Oh, I see. Hold on. What did you write the first time? Oh, I see. I didn't even catch the apostrophe. See, I was thinking you were just talking about the general grammar of the sentence. If we're focusing on lets in your original statement, the site also lets apostrophe s. That is wrong. I didn't even notice that because I wasn't looking for that. I was just looking at the general grammar of the sentence. I was actually focusing on you do writing exchanges because I thought that was the question. But lets apostrophe s is like, we almost never say let us. It's let us, like let us go. Like it's I think it would be called the volitional in grammar terms. I forget, but it's like saying like, okay, I don't even know how to describe it. I want to say vamos, like in Spanish, but it's kind of like an imperative, like let's go, but it involves the speaker. So I'm not just commanding you like go. I'm saying, okay, let's go. Like we're both going. That's apostrophe s, and it's actually let us, but we almost never say the us anymore. It's sort of just a standard let's, and we write that with apostrophe because the us is contracted. Us usually does not contract. This is a special case. In the second version, where you put let's without the apostrophe, that would be correct because it allows you, it lets you. So I let him go. I allow him to go. That's not let us. That's let something or let someone do something. Yeah. So I'm glad you mentioned that because I completely overlooked that detail. Very nice. Nuts, bananas. Oh, I see. Okay, we're talking about crazy nuts, bananas. Yeah. Yes, good. Yeah, bananas is another one. You drive me bananas. Yeah. That one sounds a little bit dated, like maybe it's from the 50s or 60s, kind of like I don't think people would normally say that, but um, it is another synonym. Yeah, it means the same thing. Good. Okay, and I want to get down to trust here really quick. So yes, I have. Okay, so to answer trust question, well, if you've seen those, then I mean, hmm, there are a couple different ways I can describe it, but I think I've covered all those in the videos. Um, what are you having trouble with? Um, like, are you just looking for like an easier way? Because the ways that you have found so far, including the ways that I've explained it, maybe like they're a little difficult for you, or I assume you're trying to find like an easier way to do it. Um, hmm. So, well, let's go over the way. So, a lot of teachers teach the schwa as just a really relaxed position, which in English, for English speakers, it is a really relaxed neutral position. But depending on your native language, the relaxed neutral position in your language might not be the schwa sound. In fact, it's probably not the schwa sound. So, I don't think that's usually a good way to teach it. Um, although it does work for some people, they kind of just get it and it's okay. So I also use the example of the bowl, where if you kind of try to push down a little bit, raise the front of your tongue and make this little bowl shape. Uh, 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 uh. Um, eh, One detail, I don't know if I mentioned this in the video. This might be important for um, some people. If you do the bowl, you don't have to do this, but depending on what you're doing in your mouth, you might not realize. You might also want to not just push down here, but also kind of lower your whole tongue because that'll give you some more space, right? If I just keep it kind of closed, I can still do with more of a bowl shape. But if I give myself more space, uh, it's going to sound slightly different, a little more open. That's actually more of like the upside down V. And if you're speaking quickly, it's naturally going to be a little more closed into an actual schwa position. But again, it's the same sound as I talked about before. So I don't really know. I would have to know. Can you tell me the problem you're having? Like, are you having difficulty raising the front of your tongue? Are you having difficulty relaxing your tongue? Like, what are you trying to do so that way I can have an idea of what to target because I just general advice, I can't think of any other way to explain it. When I'm working with a student and we're doing the schwa, I'll give them those ideas, right? And if they still can't make it, then I go in and based on what I'm hearing, I'll tell them, okay, tweak this, tweak that, try this, try that. And we sort of have to find it. Um, Obviously, I can't hear you. If you become a Patreon supporter, you can send me some recordings and we could do it that way. But um, I don't necessarily have to hear you. But if you can tell me sort of what you're doing, that can maybe give me some ideas of what you might want to try to change. It could even be maybe the back of your tongue is too high. Maybe you're saying like or something like that. Um, so even though it's a middle sound, the other parts of the tongue are still important because they can get in the way, right? They can cause problems. So um, for trust, I'll ask that maybe you try to give me a little bit more detail on the exact problem you're having and sort of maybe what you're looking for with this, because yeah. Um, okay. So, Steve, okay, what is the most common way to pronounce and? Are these all okay? And. Very nice question. Yeah, so and is, how do I want to describe this in a nice way? And is sort of like, it gets pushed around a lot. Let's put it that way. It gets pushed around a lot. Or you can say it's a very weak word. Okay, it's a very weak word. And what I mean by that is, first of all, like you can clearly enunciate and. That's fine. Like that's how the word is supposed to be. We will sometimes say it that way. Especially like if you hear with the way that I speak, and sometimes I'm thinking, I'm like, well, there's this and right, I might push that D out. Don't have to, but it's a little more likely. Very similar to end too, isn't it? I'm going to also talk about that in a second. Yes. Good point to bring up there, Infamous. Now, the first thing is that 9 times out of 10, the D just isn't pronounced. Okay, it's not even stopped. It just disappears. Okay, so the vowel, that also has some variations, but it's going to be more like an than and. Okay, so again, if you're clearly enunciating, the D can be there. Sometimes it just comes out. That's not a problem, but usually it's going to disappear. Okay, that's what you'll commonly hear. Now, and even if there's a connection, it's a little more likely that maybe the D will come back and connect, but we can just connect the N as well. So it's still very likely the D will disappear. Now, for the vowel part, the full enunciated vowel here is supposed to be the fourth vowel, like cat. So it's ah, just like the word an. If we say fully enunciated with no reduction, an. However, that can reduce to a schwa, so it can be un. Now, you're not going to say und, right? That's a little weird. Like if you're going to reduce it, we're probably going to drop the D. Like we're not going to be saying like German, say und, right? It's a little bit different. So, can it reduce to e? That's a question. Yes and no. Yes and no. The way that I guess I can't speak for all speakers, but I think the way that we would perceive it, if we're paying enough attention to perceive it, the first would be the reduction to a schwa. So this and that, this and that, this and that. Okay. Also can reduce to in, just like the preposition in, this in that. Okay. Or there's a very popular fast food restaurant chain in the United States called it's in, out. And what we'll commonly do, and we don't hold the N, we don't say in and out. In order to make that easier to say, we'll actually add an I sound and say in and out. So it's in, out, right? So very commonly, and can reduce to in. Now, because the full pronunciation is a, which is the fourth vowel all the way down in the front, right? E, a on the vowel chart. And I is one of the reductions, which is above e, right? Still in the front. It is possible that somebody might end up hitting e instead of a or I. That's what I would describe. You will sometimes hear it, but generally, so Infamous brought up, right, similar to end. Okay, the D in end, you can potentially drop that for different reasons. Sometimes ND, the D can drop. Usually it's NT, the T will drop if there's like a connection to a vowel. But that D is going to be a little more stable in end. In addition, that vowel e, right, that's a common problem for English learners, is making the difference between the third vowel e and the fourth vowel a. Okay. So it's, if somebody does happen to say the third vowel for and, the brain of a native speaker is most likely not even going to pick that up, and they're either going to interpret it as a or I, or maybe even because those are the a is the full pronunciation, I and are the possible reductions. And so the brain would probably compensate for it, because otherwise it would be like end, which would not be the right word. If I say like this and that, or if I drop the D, this and that, it's possible, but even me saying it, I know I'm saying the third vowel, and my brain is trying to hear the second vowel. It's already compensating for me. So I wouldn't intentionally try to say and with the third vowel eh. Okay, don't try to do that. Second vowel fine, schwa fine. But in addition to that, and can drop all the way down to just a syllabic consonant. N. Now, depending on what's before it, like I said, in, out, it's going to be easier to add back a vowel sound. But if I say this and that, instead of saying this sin or this sun, I can say this sin, because I can go from the S straight to the N with nothing between it. This and that. Oh, I do this and that, this and that. And that will commonly happen. That's another common variation. So there's actually like 5 different ways if you include the D, to say this one word. And none of them are right, none of them are wrong. They're just variations and degrees of enunciation. It generally kind of whatever one comes out is the answer. But again, I would avoid trying to do the third vowel because you're probably going to run into some trouble with that. Or you might run into some trouble with that. That's definitely not how we think of it. We don't think of it as eh. Okay, am I the only one who has an agglutinative? There's that TIVE ending. Agglutinative language as their native language here. Yeah, if I remember right, you speak Turkish. That sounds right. I didn't know Turkish was an agglutinative language. I know Korean is. That's the only agglutinative language I'm aware of. I'm not an expert on, all the different types of languages, but I know Korean is one of them. Let's see here. So you might be, who knows? And that's actually an interesting thing, unknown. Because you do speak an agglutinative language, and if it is Turkish, if it's not one of the other languages, if you haven't reached out, so I assume you're not particularly interested, but or maybe you just missed that video. If you want to help participate in the rhythm comparison between languages lesson that I'm going to be putting together very soon, we can set up a little meeting and talk about that. I can maybe also give you a little bit more help in the process if you want. But I pretty much have all the languages I need, I think. I still don't have a Persian speaker, which I was hoping to find. And I had a couple others, but yeah, we're almost ready for that lesson. So anyway, moving on. When you speak, yeah. When you speak pass, that makes sense. When you speak fast, just say, I guess. Generally, yes. Generally, yes. Again, it depends what comes before it. You might have to sort of connect it with a little vowel sound in between. It's going to be easier to say that way. So, yeah, but you can just reduce it to N. As I said, drive me bananas. Wow, yeah, it's new for me. Good enough. Exactly. There you go. Yeah, drive me bananas. In fact, that's that's sometimes used as like a pun or like a joke. So if like I don't know, if there's a monkey involved, monkeys, bananas. Okay, like oh, this monkey drives me bananas. Ha 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 ha. Whatever. But have you been doing push-ups? You look hella strong. Oh, well, thank you. I have been doing push-ups actually. It's mostly the shirt. Usually the shirts I wear, I'm either wearing long sleeve or I'm wearing a shirt where the sleeves are like down to here. And this is actually a medium. We were talking about my shirt earlier, but this is a medium, and that's one reason I like it because it's a little more fitting. But you don't usually see my form because the shirts I wear are baggier. We would say they're a little bigger. But thank you for that. Nancy. Hello, Nancy. Welcome to the chat. Can you pronounce close and house? I used to pronounce it with the Z instead of the S. Okay. Well, there is a little detail here, special detail here. This word house is an S. There is no Z. Okay. If you say houses, That second S is going to be a Z in the plural. And some people actually say houses, and they'll change that first one into a Z also in the plural, not in the singular, just the plural. So the word house, yes, that's supposed to be an S by itself. However, this word, this actually is two different words spelled the same way. Okay, there's close, meaning near, something is near to me physically, or I'm close to finishing the project, like we were talking about last week. So I'm close to the end of the project. But if it's the verb, right, can you please close the door? Okay, it's a Z sound, spelled with an S, but it's a Z sound. This is again why I tell you guys over and 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 over again, focus on your ears, not on the spelling. Okay, focus on your ears. Especially when you have cases like this where there are two words that are spelled the same, but they're actually pronounced slightly differently. Okay, always focus on your ears. This is why I tell you that. I'm not just telling you that to be special or to stand out on YouTube or because I'm crazy. This is what you want to do. Trust me. Focus on your ears. You are very welcome, Nancy. Yes. Now you know. So, anyway, this is just one of many, many common problems that people ask me all the time. I get questions like that all the time. Like, can you say this, or is it true that this, or blah blah blah, and they're good questions because you guys don't know. Some of it is just you haven't learned that yet. Some of it you've been taught wrong, and some of it maybe in school you learned British English, now you're learning American English, and there are some things that are a little weird. Although I had one student from Russia. Have one student from Russia. I'm still working with him. Who recently we were talking about like have got to, and they teach. I don't know if it's still true today, but when he was in school, they were teaching him British English, and his teacher told him that it's supposed to be have to, and have got to is some stupid American version that's incorrect, and that is in no way accurate. Absolutely in no way accurate. I can't speak completely for the British version of things, but that's a whole different topic. It's a whole different subject. But the point there is that sometimes you guys are taught things maybe based on a different dialect, or maybe you're taught things that are partially or completely wrong, or sometimes you just haven't learned the thing yet, which is why I say start from the beginning. Even if you're intermediate, go back and train your ears, go back and train your mouth. You don't have to have a perfect pronunciation, but you should definitely at least train your ears because it's also going to help with your listening. You're going to be able to hear so much better. It's like the way most people approach languages, they completely ignore pronunciation, or they do a little bit of work with it, especially if they take traditional classes, which pronunciation is almost completely ignored. And it's kind of like if you were trying to learn a language with cotton in your ears. Like if you took cotton balls, put them in your ears, and you're trying to listen to people speak to you. That's what it's like if you don't start with training your ears for the sounds and the rhythm and the stress first. You make it so much harder on yourself. That's why I tell you guys these things. Anyway, moving on. Yuko, I'm Japanese. Yeah, I figured I wasn't sure because the first name seems Japanese, but then the second name, I'm like, So I don't know. I always feel. I know it's not like it probably seems random from a Japanese perspective, but with my limited Japanese vocabulary, every time somebody says, "Oh, hi, I'm Japanese," I'm like, "Oh, sugoi." So yeah. 少し日本語がわかります。I'm Japanese. I have trouble pronouncing car. My husband says it sounds like call. It does not. R colored vowel, and dark L are difficult for me. Yeah, these are common problems for English learners in general, but especially for Japanese speakers because you don't have an L sound. And your R sound is close to a tapped R like you find in Spanish or Russian or even Portuguese. But even then, it's a little bit different, but it's very close to that. Actually, kind of close to the flap D in English, like what if? It's very similar to that. The Japanese R sound. But in English, that is not our R. Okay. And then the dark L, which I call the half L vowel sound. If you don't know why, I have a few lessons talking about why I call it the half L, especially the main lesson for that. And you can learn more about that there. But I don't like dark L because dark doesn't mean anything to me. And it is actually a vowel sound. It is a vowel sound. It's not the light L is a consonant sound. The dark L is a vowel sound. But anyway, so there's, that's very loud again. There is a world of difference between the sound in car and the sound in call. And this is, again, why you need to train your ears. I am going to be making, at some point, I haven't made one in I think a couple weeks here, but I am still going to be making more minimal pairs and extra practice lessons. I've been thinking a lot about the rhythm lessons recently, so but I am going to be making at some point a lesson comparing doing minimal pairs just like this, car and call, right? And so you'll have a chance to train your ears with that. Also, when I make my minimal pair or my ear training software, which I'm going to be making after I get monetized on YouTube, then that will help you as well. What I will tell you for now is the first thing you want to do is be able to hear the R, not the R color in like R or ear, right? You want to hear the sound. Make sure you can hear right? And preferably be able to produce right? If you want to actually pronounce it. So make sure you play with that first. Don't jump into car if you can't say okay? After that, of course, you also want to be able to do the L, specifically the dark L, which is a little tricky, a little more difficult. It's based in the back of the tongue, oh. And again, I have a lesson on that, so you can look at that. Once you have those two pieces, then you can start coloring things. Okay, so you can go from ah to because you have to go from one position into the instead of just doing straight If you don't have the itself and you try to go from another sound into the how do you know where to stop? You don't, right? Or how do you know how to tweak the position and shape and tenseness of your tongue as you move to that sound? You don't. So you need that endpoint first, and then you can start putting the pieces together. Same thing with call. Okay, make sure you can do and then you have to go all. The ah and the well, I teach the merged cot merger, so there's just one sound instead of ah and all. It's just ah in the back. And that merged and the half L or dark L are very, very close in the mouth. They're very, very, very close in the mouth. And you can actually see that on my vowel chart. But again, get the pieces. Okay, get the pieces first. That's going to be the best way to improve your pronunciation. Anytime you're having trouble, whether it's in a sentence with a word, going from just one sound to another sound, you got to master the pieces first, and then you try to put them together. Okay. What does low key mean in these phrases? This song is low key fire. She's low key cute. Okay, so yeah, low key is slang. It's a pretty common slang that it doesn't sound too slangy anymore. It's just kind of informal. Fire. This is a very slangy use of fire, which is relatively new. I think first time I heard it was a couple years ago. I think maybe even just a year ago. But I'm kind of out of the loop for the cool stuff. So this song is low key fire. She's low key cute. Low key. Actually, I want to double check because I don't want to give you false information. There's how I understand it, but I want to make sure my understanding of it is correct because I never actually looked it up. I just sort of assumed from context. Let's see here. Let's go to Urban Dictionary. See, there's new terms and stuff that can come up that you ask a native and they might not even know, or they might not be sure because they're relatively new. I don't really use low key very much. I hear people use it. I know some people who use it, but I don't really use it myself. It's not part of my vocabulary very much. So low key. Oh, apparently it's also in the regular dictionary. The dictionary recognized word low-key is an adjective that means, according to Merriam-Webster, so in Merriam-Webster dictionary, quiet and relaxed, not very forceful, emotional, or noticeable, of low intensity or restrained. That pretty much makes sense. So it's like my impression of it is always like it's like low, it's not like super strong, but also the idea of like, well, it's kind of hidden. Like, I wouldn't go out and tell the world that I like this, but just so you know, like I kind of like this. This is kind of cool. So let's see, the slang variant of low key, often written without the dash, the hyphen, functions as an adverb. Low key is typically used to describe a speaker's desire or emotions, retains the dictionary definition meaning of low intensity and not very emotional. However, additionally, it can also indicate go away. It can also indicate something that is secretly, perhaps shamefully wanted or felt by the speaker. Exactly. So my interpretation based on the context and the places I've heard it was 100% correct. I was able to actually, so my understanding was perfect. Now, fire, of course, is sort of a relatively new slang for really cool, right? It's like, oh, it's fire, it's hot, it's really awesome. So low key fire, it's like, yeah, this is kind of a bit. It's like I don't want anybody to know that I think it's fire, that I think it's cool, right? But just so you know, I'm gonna tell you, like, yeah, it's. I think this song is kind of cool. I like it. I like it. Basically, you're just saying I like it. Or if you say she's low key cute, you're like, hey, that girl, like she's kind of cute. Don't tell nobody that I said that, but I think she's kind of cute. That's basically what you're saying. Um, okay, unknown language is Turkish. Yes, very good. So awesome. You haven't said anything else about joining in on that lesson, which you don't have to show your face if that's your concern. No pressure there. You don't have to. So I assume you're not interested. No problem. Yuko, I'm practicing with your video. Good. Yay. Awesome. Yeah, if you ever have any specific questions, this is one reason I do the live streams, because sometimes people just ask me questions. And that's great. We talk about things, and I get behind, and then it takes me a half an hour to get to your question. But aside from that, you might see something in one of my videos, and then you have a question. You're like, wait, what do you mean by this? Or can you explain that more? Bring that to the live stream. That's one reason why we're here. So perfect. Nancy, okay, where you said where I've been there. Infamous, me neither. See, out of context. It might be the R and all problem. I don't know. Anyway, trust. So I just don't understand in which position my tongue. Yeah. So a more natural way to phrase this, I just don't understand which position my tongue has to be in my mouth. Yes, you can put two prepositions next to each other like that, and saying in which position, it's grammatically correct. It's okay. It sounds a little more formal, just so you know. Anyway, this is a grammar point. So I just don't know, or I just don't understand which position my tongue has to be in my mouth when I'm trying to pronounce the schwa. Okay. Now when I'm pronouncing the schwa, my tongue is in the middle position. Okay. So first point, because we might need some clarification just to be sure, but there's a couple things I have to say here. So right, as we talk about, there's your tongue, right? And this would be like the back of your tongue back here, right? So we know some sounds are placed on around the front of the tongue, the middle of the tongue, the back of the tongue. Now, middle could also potentially mean up and down, right? So you open your mouth like halfway. That's kind of like the middle. And the schwa, generally speaking, is sort of like halfway this way, halfway that way, more or less, roughly. Now, I might have just realized part of the problem here. On my vowel chart, I put the two symbols next to each other, right? I put upside down E, upside down B. And I explained this in a couple places, so I don't think this is the problem you're having, but just so everybody's clear on this, the upside down V, because it's more enunciated, it's the same basic sound. Because it's more enunciated, you're going to open a bit more. And the schwa, you're going to close a bit more. But it's still going to be in the middle, right? It's just going to be maybe a little more open, a little more closed. So in terms of middle going top to bottom, there's actually a bit of a variation there. And the more you enunciate it, the more it's actually going to be closer to the bottom of opening. Okay, that doesn't mean it's going to be super open like ah. Okay, it's not that open, but it's going to be a little more farther down. Now, in terms of the front to back, the easy thing to say is put it in the middle of the tongue. But what does that mean? Right? What does that mean? I think that maybe that's the problem here. Because you say you try to put it in the middle position, which is what it should be. But if you're not pronouncing the right sound, then there's something else that's the problem. It could be maybe that you think it's in the middle position, because sometimes, especially if you're not used to feeling your tongue, it might kind of feel like it's in the right place, but maybe it's not. Yeah, that can happen. I'm not saying that is the case, but it could happen. And another factor that isn't talked about as much is the exact tenseness of the tongue. What is the rest of the tongue doing? Is there a particular shape to the tongue? So with the schwa, many English learners find success when they make that sort of bowl shape, right? So there's maybe a little more tenseness here. There's a certain shape to it, and then you can make the right sound. Doesn't work for everybody, but for some speakers or for some learners, that helps them produce the right sound. Okay. For the speakers that doesn't help, that means that even if they try that, there's still something else that's off, right? And so what you need to do, see if you have somebody who can give you feedback, which again, I don't want to force anybody to join my Patreon. It's completely optional, but if you join my Patreon, I can give you some feedback from some recordings that you send me. And you can join my Patreon for as little as $2. Like I try to make it super cheap for people who don't have a lot of money. Completely optional again, but if you can get feedback from somebody, like maybe you can go to italki, pay a tutor for one class and tell them how you sound. But you also want somebody who has a good ear, preferably, because then they can tell you, oh, it sounds like maybe the back of your tongue is too high, or it sounds like maybe, your tongue is too stiff, or whatever it is. Usually my ears can pick up on those things because I have pretty good ears. So without being able to hear you and being able to pinpoint diagnose, you would have to go in and you have to say, okay, how's the back of my tongue? Like if you make a little change, like say you try to lower the back of your tongue. Okay, does it sound any better? If not, like if it sounds worse, go back, right? That wasn't the problem. Maybe your tongue is too tense, right? So maybe try to like relax your tongue a little bit and maybe still keep that basic shape, but kind of relax it a little bit, or let your mouth open just a little bit more, or whatever it is. And by making these little changes in different places, you play with it and you start to hear, okay, that sounds better, that doesn't sound better. Now, if you can't hear it, that's another problem where you definitely need to get feedback from somebody. And what I would recommend is to join my Patreon or maybe to try to find a teacher with a good ear. So it sounds to me that you just have something going on, like maybe your position is good, but you have something else going on that is in the way of the right sound. So we have to find what that is. I think that's the best I have for you right now. Pronunciation on my tongue in the middle position. Yeah. I don't like that answer though. I want to give something better than that. I will mention this also. One common problem. I don't know if I mentioned this in the main lesson. I probably did, but one common problem, even if we know a lot of English learners, when they're trying to do the schwa, they'll go more towards their native language A sound, which is going to be probably somewhere around like ah, right? And we don't want ah. That's definitely not it, right? But maybe they have the right shape. Maybe it's not ah, right? They're definitely not doing that mistake. But a lot of English learners, especially if they have an ah sound that's kind of sort of in the middle towards the front, not ah like in English, but sort of in that area, it's very, very, very common that they will think that they're doing the schwa. But when I hear them, it sounds like they're letting the sound roll forward a little bit. So it's not quite in the front and it's not quite in the middle. It's sort of just like rolling like towards that halfway point between the front and the middle. And they get sort of the sound more like, let's see, kind of like and it's like that's not really a sound in English. It doesn't really match anything. It's not it's not it's not from some other language, but it's not a schwa. So that's the one big piece of advice I would maybe give you is like maybe it might feel like it's in the middle, but maybe you're letting it roll forward. And that's one reason why I say to do the bowl, because it can help to sort of correct that. So maybe you try to bring the front of your tongue up more, not too high. You definitely don't want to be touching anything. But if you try to maybe play with that part of it, maybe you'll get a better sound. I think, unfortunately, that's the best I have at the moment to try to help you. Otherwise, I would have to hear how you sound. Is it okay to pronounce yeah as yeah, 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 a without yeah, yeah? Okay. Yes and no. These are intentional manipulations. They're standard. They're pretty standard, but they're intentional manipulations of the word. So they are not the way that we are going to normally say them. You just say yeah, 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 yeah. Okay. Which is supposed to be yeah, yeah. We don't always, especially with this word, we don't always open up all the way. We're going to do more of a lazy which is like instead of very close to but not quite. It's really the shape is the difference there. The height is about the same. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Now it could be more towards like the start of the diphthong a, yeah, 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 yeah. That's a pretty common variation where it's a little bit lazier. But saying like yeah, 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 where we actually add like a schwa sound after it instead of yeah, that possible. If it's exaggerated, like yeah, like that's some people will say that sometimes. That is an intentional manipulation of the language that is not normal speech. Okay, or if they say yeah, yeah, or yeah, we can do that, but it's an intentional manipulation of the language. It gives it a certain sound. Some people might look at you funny, but some people like to do that sometimes. Like, I don't know, something really awesome happens, like, yeah, that's awesome, whatever it is, but not a normal speech, no. Infamous, I always like a Z, said. Oh, I always said a Z. Okay, for the close or close and house problem, I assume. Yeah, so. Well, house is definitely not Z. Can you help me? Or wait, yeah, can you help me with the word that and the? Sometimes I can't hear the difference when they're pronounced too fast. They are there. That way they stopped T, by the way. Good detail. Just going to disappear anyway, especially in really default would be to stop it. The clearly enunciated version would be to say it, but that's the least common option. So by default, it would have a stop T. So the word that and the, sometimes I can't hear the difference. Yeah, I get this problem sometimes. It can definitely happen. What this means, now, especially if this is a problem, yeah, when pronounced too fast, okay? So I want to give you a little secret which helps to explain some of this, and also something that you can actually practice doing if I haven't mentioned it to you yet before. So I accidentally discovered something, which is so my Japanese is nowhere near good enough to be able to comprehend like a TV show, right? But I like anime, and I like anime dubbed. No, sorry, Subbed, not dubbed. Subbed means it has subtitles. Dubbed means they change it into another language. And anime that is not in the original Japanese is usually a bit weird, and the voice actors are they sound weird because I don't know, it just has a weird feel. So I like watching the original Japanese with English subtitles. And that's okay because I'm not focusing on learning the language. I tell you guys not to use subtitles because you're trying to learn the language. There are uses for subtitles. Now, one thing that I accidentally discovered is I started watching anime in order to save time because I'm quite busy, but I like anime. I started to watch it on 1.5 speed. Right now, that 2 times speed is a little too fast for me to read and still like follow the images and follow the story and everything. It's a little uncomfortable. So 1.5 speed is like just right for me to read quickly, look at the images, follow the story. I have no problem with that. And so my ears, in fact, I watched almost all of Attack on Titan. I think it was like 3 seasons. They're in the last season now, but I think it was like 3 seasons, 2 or 3 seasons, at 1.5 speed. And by the time I finished that, I at the start of one of the episodes, I think it was the first episode of season, the last season, or the final season, and I forgot at the start to put it on 1.5 speed. And so it felt really slow. I was like, why are they speaking so slow? But I noticed that everything was so clear. Even words that I didn't know, I could clearly hear those words in the flow of speech at normal speed. And so your brain adapts, right? I watch on YouTube, I watch almost everything at 2 times speed because my brain easily adapts to that and I can understand everything, no problem. Well, I was at one point I was watching anime on Anime Rush, but they have at some point they got rid of the speed function for some reason. I don't know why. It's really sad. So I don't know. But anyway, so that is one thing that you can do. It's going to be uncomfortable at first, and I will give you permission to use subtitles for this if you want. Although you can see a lot of benefits if you don't use subtitles for this, but find a TV show or just generally just watch English at say 1.5 times speed. Watch as much as you can for say 2 weeks or even just 1 week. Make sure that you're not just getting like 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Like it doesn't have to be all day, but get a good exposure every day for a week or two, and then start listening to the language again at normal speed. And you'll actually probably start to notice that little details like this start to become a lot easier to understand. I don't know how long that effect lasts, but I have noticed watching Japanese watching anime back at normal speed that I do still have some of those benefits. Like it's still a little bit easier to pick out words, but because I'm not listening to it at 1.5 speed anymore, I've sort of lost a bit of that benefit. So I don't know. It might be a somewhat short-term effect, but either way, it'll give your brain experience to start filtering out these details. Now, specifically with that and what this is telling me, if you have difficulty here, number one, it might just be a speed thing where you just have to practice listening to things at faster speed, in which case what I just described to you is probably the perfect thing that you need. If you don't do that, eventually, right, if you keep listening, you keep trying to focus on this and that at normal speed, your brain will eventually figure it out, but doing it at fast speed might help you get there faster. But what this is telling me is that at least at faster speed, you're having trouble because if the T is stopped or possibly disappeared, as I said, it can disappear in this word, you're really having difficulty between uh. Okay. Now, sometimes the is the, especially if there's a vowel after it. We don't always follow that rule. It sometimes happens that way where we still say like the other day, but you can say the other day. So sometimes you'll hear E, but usually it's even if there's a vowel after it, it's just a schwa sound. Now, That I think is the core of the problem. So I have the minimal pairs, but they're kind of like slower to mixed speed. Um, this is a point where maybe you need faster minimal pairs, right? Where you need to train your ears listening at a faster speed between the two. That might be something that's very useful for you. So if you want, um, I can make a strictly faster version between these two sounds, right? So it could be, say, with, I don't know, bat and butt, right? Instead of saying bat, right? I say like bat, 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 and you have to hear it at that super, super fast speed. That might be the best thing for you, but it depends. So you can try with the 1.5 speed thing and see if that helps you at all. But really, probably the just time and minimal pair practice will probably be the best remedy, I think. Okay, so let me know if you want me to make a faster version of that, because if you're like, whatever, then I'm not going to make it because nobody is asking for it. But if you want me to, then I might as well make it. But Steve says anchois too. I don't know what that's attached to. Do you mean like going back to yeah, saying like yeah? Because that's what I get from that. If so, no. Maybe very lazily and informally, but it's not supposed to be yeah. You say yep, 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 yep. Those are variations of yeah. Okay, I'm glad Nancy brought that up because I was training talking to Google Assistant the other day. I was practicing the sentence, his house is big. Whenever I pronounce Z, the S in house. His house is big. His house is big. Yeah, so here, as I said, the plural of house, which would sound exactly like houses, right? It sounds, well, if I don't break the two words house and is, it'd be houses. And if I say plural, houses, it's going to sound the same because the S is going to connect over. Some people do say houses. There are many houses here. Now, because of that, some people will also say his house is big, and they'll also change the S to a Z here as well. This is a special case and not everybody does. I would recommend that you don't do that, but it is something that some people do, and it's fine. I don't think it's wrong or it sounds bad or anything. But because the S in house is supposed to be an S, um, I would recommend that you just always keep it an S regardless of what's after it, because that's how it's supposed to be, and then you'll never accidentally say house in the singular. But yeah, in his, that's also a Z. And then is also a Z. So his is spelled with an S, is spelled with an S, they're Z sounds. House is spelled with an S and it's an S sound. So his house is big. His house is big. His house is big. Okay, anyway. The algorithm would understand houses instead of house. Interesting. House is big. His house is big. You might be. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Exactly. See, because as I said, whether you change the S in house to a Z when there's the is after it, either way, it's going to sound like the plural. Houses, whatever. And so the algorithm, if you give it more context, like it should be able to figure it out from this, but we know that it's not perfect. So if you say like, I don't know, the house over there is big. Obviously, they're separated now. It's probably gonna figure it out. Or I think that house. Let's see. I think that house is really big. I think that house is really big. Maybe a little bit more context, it could figure it out. I don't know, but it. Right, we know these things aren't perfect. Do you live stream every week? Sorry, Nancy, it took me a second to get here. Do I live stream every week? Yes, I do. Every week, every Thursday. The exact time will vary. Sometimes I do a little earlier, a little later, because I know people live in different parts of the world. But yes, once a week, every Thursday, I am here. unless I have something special come up, like an appointment or, whatever else is happening. Which actually reminds me, next week, I might not be able to live stream. I'm still going to try to show up, but we have a thing that we have to do. And it is going to require me to not be home for about 4 hours. And I also have other things to do, so should still have the live stream, but maybe not next week. It's possible. Steve, you use cat merger in the diphthongs I and ow. So if I use the unmerged, so I do not use the cat merger in I and ow. That I use a completely different sound. So the start of I and ow, the way that I speak, and maybe it's not 100% the same, but as far as I am aware and as far as I can hear, it's exactly the same as non-Western General American speakers do it, which is there's a sound. Ah is all the way back here. Okay. Even the unmerged version, it's not the unmerged ah. Okay. Maybe some speakers do that, but there's a sound, there's ah, and then right behind ah, there's another sound. And that other sound is only used in the diphthongs I and ow. Okay. If you try to use the merged ah, especially the merged one, if you use the unmerged one, it'll probably sound okay, because it's closer. But if you use the merged ah, you'd be saying like I and ow, I, ow, ah, I, ow. Like you're gonna sound like maybe you're German or something, like you're speaking with a German accent or whatever. Like it doesn't sound quite right. Um, and I don't know, because I keep getting this question, but I don't know why. Because that's not how I teach it. So I don't know where this confusion is coming from. Maybe it's with the IPA symbols. I don't know. Could be. Anyway. Okay, Nancy, could you tell me what's the difference between pronouncing here and ear? Yeah, so ear doesn't have an H in front of it. And in the spelling, but also in the pronunciation. So here, in English, sometimes we have silent H's. And in fact, the H, even if it's not silent, it can very often just disappear anyway. That's a linking rule. It's a slightly different topic. But usually if there's an H, it's not just spelling. Sometimes it's just spelling, like in the word hour, no H there. But in the word here, there is an H there. And the H in English is just air. It's just breath. In fact, I like to call the H the voiceless vowel consonant, because it's usually seen as a consonant sound, but it's voiceless. It's always voiceless, so it's just breath, and it will sort of take the shape of the vowel sound that is after it. Not necessarily perfectly, not necessarily all the time. It doesn't have to, but like if I say here, I'm kind of already in the E, and I start voiceless, right? Like I'm saying E, but with no voice. Like he, here, here. So that's all it is. If I say happy, that's ha, ha. Okay. You might see a little bit of movement in there. That's okay. But happy. Okay. So it's just like the voiceless version of the vowel, basically. Either way, it's just air. You're just pushing air out. So when we say ear, there's no H there. It just goes straight into the E sound. Also, I feel that it is useful to mention, it's a minor point, but it is extremely useful for some learners. Technically speaking, when we start with a vowel sound, this isn't the most useful point, because if it's not the first word, then it doesn't really matter, because whatever's before it will kind of just flow into it, or whatever it is. But like if I just say ear, notice I'm not saying year. I'm starting in a stop. Okay. All vowels in English, if there's nothing before them, they start in a stop, in a glottal stop. Okay. Ear, ear, and we sort of push it out there, and whatever position we're in, it'll start taking the shape of that vowel. Where with here, there's no stop at all. It's just breath. He, e, e, and you can kind of hear that coming out of that stop. E, he, e. Okay, so that would be that. Do. Okay, Steve, where do you watch it? Oh, I already answered that. This sound is hard for me. The word father, yeah, this is a common problem. Yeah, father, for example, it has the same sound of cut, I guess, but it's not the same to my ears. I pronounce father as a true A. I don't know what true A is supposed to be. um, which that's another thing because the way that most people teach you, there's like, okay, the long A, the short A, and like all kinds of A's, and it's like, no, there's not. A, this is a letter in English. Okay, not talking about IPA symbols. In English, this is the letter A. Okay, and this is the capital letter A. We have several sounds that are somewhat perceived as A sounds by a native, but then we try to teach it to you that way, and it confuses everything. Okay, it's horrible. So like ah is thought of as like an A sound, and ah is thought of as an A sound, and the start of I and ow is thought of as an A sound. But they're not. Okay, ah is ah, whether merged or not merged. Okay, if it's not merged, then ah, right? It's two different sounds. But ah is ah is ah, I or ow, the start of I and ow is the start of I and ow. They're their own sounds. There is no true A or whatever. Like I kind of know what you're trying to point to with that, but I think um, it's a misleading concept. So I'm not sure how you would be trying to pronounce father then, like father or father or something. Like I don't even know. Because if it's, let's see, I don't even know which one. I guess I'll have to go to the dictionary to find if they would use ah or aw. Because I don't speak that way. So according to the dictionary, yeah, it would be the unmerged ah. So father, father. Um, so yeah, I guess it doesn't matter. Sometimes technically speaking, every sound that is different before a sound and every sound that is different after a sound. Like if you put F before ah, you put TH after ah, you change that F to, I don't know, an S. I don't know, you change the TH to whatever. Okay, it doesn't matter. Technically, every little sound before or after another sound can, especially for the vowels, they can potentially change how that vowel sound is going to sound because we have certain different starting and end points that we're moving to as we go into and out of that vowel sound. Those don't matter. Okay, they're minuscule, they're minor. If you have good enough ears to detect those slight little tiny changes, congratulations. That's a really good skill to have. I have that skill as well if I really focus on it. But the average native speaker's brain, even if you say, ah, just slightly different where it's still in the range. That's why I talk about the range of sounds, especially vowel sounds. As long as it's in that same range and has the right quality of English, then a native speaker's brain is going to interpret it as the perfect sound. It's going to be just fine, even if there are minute little tiny changes that you could potentially hear. So you might just have really good ears. Who knows? I only know Netflix that have now to put 1.5 speed. Well, YouTube has up to 2 times speed. I really, 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 really wish that YouTube would put 4 times speed or at least 3 times speed because 2 times speed to me is now normal speed. um, usually I'm at 2 times speed and I'll go to change it to 2 times speed and I'm like, oh, it's already at 2 times speed in English, of course. If it's another language, it's a different story. But when I'm listening to English on YouTube, 2 times is normal for my brain. And your brain will adjust pretty quick. So if it's normal speed, um, my brain will be like, okay, this is normal, this is fine. Might seem a little bit slow, but I may not notice it. Where if I put on 2 times speed, it's already adapted to 2 times speed, and so that's why sometimes it seems like normal. And your brain can go in and out of those speeds once you get a little practice. But watch Ben Shapiro, you get natural Wi-Fi speed, or just don't watch Ben Shapiro. um, I think that might be better advice, but that's politics. um, but yeah, he does seem to speak pretty fast. Josh, that's irrelevant. But what does? Oh, this is irrelevant. But what does DMC free stand for in music? I looked it up. DMC free. Probably the same thing that it means in ebooks. I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but it's an anti-piracy thing. Unless I'm mixing up acronyms, I might be confusing it with something. But if it is what I'm thinking of, then it's like, for example, most ebooks, if you buy on Amazon, and most music that, like, if you buy it from like the Apple Store or whatever. I mean, I don't know. I don't buy music from the Apple Store, but I know on ebooks, if you try to, say, put that ebook into a program and like change the format from like the Amazon format to like a regular EPUB file, just a generic ebook format, it'll block you because of this thing, that it doesn't allow you to do that. Me, I feel like if you bought my book, like, people are going to try to pirate my stuff if they want to pirate my stuff. And actually, that research shows that can help improve sales. So I really don't care that much. Um, I'm not telling you guys to go and pirate my stuff, but on my ebooks, if you bought my ebook, I think that you should, like, if you have the means and the knowledge to change it into a different format because you prefer a different format, which is a little more technical for most people. But if you want to do that, I feel you have the right to do that because you paid for the book. So I don't put DMC or whatever it is on my books. But I assume that's the same thing in music, where if you try to, change the file format or make a copy of it, it'll block you from doing that. Um, which is understandable, but I also think is stupid. So anyway, very close and so hard, infinite infinity. I guess we're talking about with father, or with maybe with Steve's thing with the I diphthongs, I and L. I don't know. Out of context now that I caught up again. So can R be pronounced as or is this quite strange? Okay, this is a good question. Because remember, earlier I was saying, like, generally you're not going to reduce to a schwa. But there are probably some random cases. This is a very, very special case as well. So depending on the stress pattern, right? Because if I say, like, how are you? Okay, R is going to get the stress in that special case. Normally, to B does not get the stress. Okay, it's just like an equal sign. It doesn't matter that much. But there are cases, depending on the sentence and the purpose of the sentence, where it might be stressed, in which case, no, you cannot reduce it to a schwa, like, ever. Okay, I'm not going to say how are you? How are you? Like, this is weird. Okay, but what if I say this? Like, what are you doing? I can say, what are you doing? What are you? What are you? Okay, what a. Now it should be water. Okay, it can sort of contract. It would become a flap D. The ah would disappear in the contraction, but we still have that vowel, and so we'll flap the D because it's, in this case, it's connecting when the T connects, it acts like a flap D, if it connects to a vowel. So, well, if there's a vowel before it also, you know what I mean. Water, water, not water, as water. But this particular word, because it's to be and because it's usually not stressed and because it's very, very common, there are certain combinations of words where you can potentially reduce R to a. Now, if I say, for example, are you going to the party? If I say, are you going to the party? We wouldn't do that. In that case, we could actually just drop are, and I could say, you going to the party? Okay, that's a slightly different thing where we're actually completely dropping the word. We can do that. In informal speech, that happens all the time where we drop do or are or is. You can't always do it in every single grammatical case, but for normal questions, most of the time, it's a common thing we do. But if you're going to say are, you can't just reduce it to in that case. I can't say you going. Okay. So in certain special combinations like what are, yes, you can reduce are to but normally it's going to be strange. Yeah. And again, I apologize. This is one reason why English seems so hard for you guys, because we have all these. It's like, what do you? There's like this one random case where you could do this, and it's like, it is what it is. There's a lot to learn about English, and of course, you don't have to pronounce that. It's nice to know because you're going to hear it, but you don't have to do that. You could just say water, and you'll sound perfectly fine. So, infamous infinity is the sound below the on in IPA, and the other a from cot is on the other corner below. Oh, I see. So you're saying, what did you call it? Like the true a or true a or whatever. Sound below a. Let me see here. I don't think there's a sound below a. Which vowel chart are you using a vowel chart? Well, I mean, I guess you have to be using a vowel chart. Which vowel chart are you using? I don't think that's on my vowel chart. Let's see here. Double check. Because in my mind, I have the monophthong chart and the diphthong chart in two separate things in my head, and I don't always over. Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah, that's why you mean below, because it is actually okay. My brain didn't remember that it was below it. I just remembered that it was behind. Okay, so you're saying that the true a is the sound, or the true a, whatever, is the sound below a, which would be the start of the diphthongs I and ow, and only exists in those diphthongs. And the other a from cot is on the other corner below. Yes. In the merger, cot merger, that's going to be in the back corner. They're very similar, and I can't see any difference. Interesting. I guess I'll have to make a mental pair about that eventually. I'll add it to the list. You guys are just going to make me cover every possible combination and permutation of sounds. Now I can see if we're talking about the unmerged cot, which is farther forward, they're definitely going to sound very similar. You can still have a problem. I mean, for whatever reason, you still might have a problem even with the merged ah, which is farther back. Things can happen. But definitely, if it's the unmerged one, that would make a lot of sense of why you might be having difficulty. So part of the problem here is that the start of I and ow are never said in isolation, just like the start of a is never said in isolation, because they only exist in the diphthongs in English. So right, that really far forward sound, the fourth sound on the chart, that has a very distinctive shape to it and a distinctive tenseness to it, that even though it's actually pretty close in position to the true A or whatever it is that's in the diphthongs, it usually that's not as big of a problem. Sometimes people will still have problems with it, but it's right? Now the ah, if it's unmerged, it's going to be a little farther forward. It's going to sound almost exactly the same, so I'm not going to worry about the difference there. But ah is okay? Fa, father, father, fa, Where the start of the diphthong, if I can isolate it, cow, 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 cat, cat, cow, it's actually kind of closer to a bit, but not in just position, but in terms of the shape of it. But it's not a. We don't say cow. Cow. That's not right. Ka. Ka. Cot. Ka. Okay. So, for example, if I say, okay, let's do cot, and let's do couch, which is not a word. But I'm going to say cow, like the animal cow, with a T at the end, so that now it's a minimal pair, right? So first the ah, right? Cot, 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 ka, cot. Cout, cout. Okay. Now it's kind of harder to hear that a itself as we start moving into the ow because that happens almost immediately, but cot, ca, ca, cow, cow. Okay, cout, cot. I can try to remove the oo part. Cot, cow, cat. It sounds very similar to cat. Cat, cow, cat, cat. Okay, it's gonna actually sound a lot more like cat. It just doesn't have the same shape as a. I hope that side-by-side comparison kind of helps a bit. But I think that's you might just need some reinforcement of minimal pairs. Yeah. See, that's usually minimal pairs will solve the problem. It's just that the start of ow or I is usually not in isolation. And so based on your language and based on just how your ears are, we can get these things a little confused. So I'm gonna have to I'm gonna be adding to my ever-growing list. Maybe like a special lesson on isolating the start of a, I, and ow, and oi. Oi in the way that I speak and the way that I teach you, which is a lot easier, is just the start of the o sound. It might be in a very slightly different position, but it's still the start of the o sound. It doesn't really matter, but I think that can help people. And then maybe doing some minimal pairs like this with trying to isolate the start of that sound can help you filter out some of these problems. So I will make lessons for that eventually. Those are really small minor points that I'll kind of get to as I go along. But if a lot of people are having that problem, then I'll probably try to push it up in priority. So moving on. Okay, so Yuko, my husband, he likes watching Attack on Titan too. Thank you for the live stream. Bye. Oh, he's probably already gone by now. I don't know when that was, but yes, thank you. Goodbye if you're still here. Sorry. Yeah, Attack on Titan is it's picking back up again, which I'm happy to say. I don't know if I like the way that they're going with it, but we'll see what happens. I also found another anime which is just absolutely amazingly fantastic. I love it. It's Tensei, which I'm not gonna say right, but Tensei Shitara Slime Dataken, which is that time I was reincarnated as a slime. It is such a good anime. But anyway, okay, they're very similar, and I can't see any difference. Okay, so we talked about that. Can him sound like M with a schwa? Yes, it can. In fact, them and him can both be reduced schwa plus m. And we're going to know from the context. So if I say, do you like him? Do you like him? Do you like him? Well, if I'm talking about him, obviously, like I would say, do you like Tom if you don't know who I'm talking about, right? Or if I give you, I don't know, some like a box of candy and you're eating the different candy, right? All these different pieces, I say, do you like them? I mean them, not him, right? So the context will tell us. See, him. Very commonly, that H is going to disappear no matter what. It doesn't have to, but very commonly it will, especially if there's a consonant to connect to the vowel in the word before it. Him will very commonly be pronounced either with a schwa or im, where we just drop the H. Where them, do you like him? Do you like him? Do you like him? That I would say just reduces to a schwa. Because even though we will write apostrophe em, like you might know from Pokemon, if you watch the English version, I like got to catch them all, catch them, and we put apostrophe em. We might spell it that way, but we don't. I don't. At least consciously, like I've never heard anybody say m for them. It reduces to a schwa. So keep that in mind as well. But okay, unknown. Oh wait, I looked it up again, and it says devastating mic controller. Yeah, no, what does that mean? The context was that someone dropped a new song and he said, listen to it, it's DMC free, don't worry. No idea. Sounds like a hip hop thing. I have no idea. So definitely not what I was talking about. But okay, infamous. I'm getting confused because, yeah. It's funny when we retype the word and we don't realize it. I do that a lot. I'm getting confused because of the word spelling. You just say the spelling, I guess. It's very hard for me to associate a from father to cot. They spell different but the same sound. One is only the O, other is A, the other one is OU. I don't associate the sounds being the same, these different spelling being the same sound. Yeah, exactly. And again, this is another reason why I say focus on the sound. Focus on the sound, the sound, not the spelling. In my main lessons for the vowel sounds, I do try to give you guys common spelling patterns because especially for certain vowel sounds like the front vowel sounds, there are very, very common patterns where you can make a good guess and say, okay, this is probably this vowel if you're not sure. So it can help you if it's a generally consistent rule. Like with the O, for example, we have the opposite problem where there's like three common ways to spell the O sound. One is with the letter O, one is OA, one is, what's the other one? O with a silent E at the end. Because actually O by itself is most commonly going to be ah, that fifth vowel sound, ah. Which you would think doesn't make sense. Why would an O by itself not be an O sound? Well, that's just English spelling. So it is what it is. So knowing some of the spelling patterns can help you guys, but these spelling patterns aren't going to make you fluent. They're not going to make you avoid, all the mistakes, especially because there's all kinds of exceptions and crazy things. Like the word heart is spelled with EA, but this breaks almost everything. Like ear is usually ear, but EA, it's often E, but it could possibly be A, like in great. Could be a couple different things, but having EAR be pronounced R is like, wow, like really even this EA can be pronounced as more of an ah sound. It's crazy. There's all kinds of weird little exceptions like that. So you always want to focus on your ears first, and knowing some of this spelling information can be helpful. Now, obviously, you're going to have certain associations between certain sounds and certain letters in a phonetic language, in a language that has a phonetic script, okay? Like Spanish. and I think like Portuguese, I'm pretty sure Portuguese is phonetic. German is phonetic, right? There might be for certain sounds, like there's like not just one letter, but it's always like the same combination of letters always produces the same sound, right? So it's still phonetic. Um, in languages like that, you can attach a letter or group of letters to a particular sound, right? Like in English, we call it the SH sound because it's usually pronounced sh. Okay, there are a couple cases where it's not, but it's sh, right? Um, but then sometimes, like nation, spelled with a T, it has an SH sound also, right? So it could be spelled a little differently. But we think of it as the SH sound because it's most commonly associated with that sound. But in a language that does not have a phonetic script like English, well, that could be interpreted two ways. That's an ambiguous statement. In a language like English that does not have a phonetic script, there will be certain associations. Like when we think of the letter A, I think most commonly the first thing we think of is ah, because if you just have the letter A by itself with no silent E, no other letters, it's most commonly going to be ah, that fourth vowel sound. So there are certain associations based on very high frequency spelling patterns, but if the script is not phonetic, you cannot tie certain letters to certain sounds. Okay. You can maybe make a generality and say, okay, usually this letter or combination is going to be associated with this particular sound, but there are pretty much always exceptions in English, especially when it comes to spelling. Okay. The sounds themselves aren't really the exceptions, it's the spelling. What are the spellings that we use to represent that sound in a particular word? The pronunciation itself is not that complicated. It's the letters we use to represent the sounds that is the complicated part. And because traditional classes don't put a lot of emphasis on pronunciation, we get this problem where you have your native language, maybe especially if you have a Latin-based script like English does, you say, okay, A, but then in English, we have all these different, like more sounds in your language, or just different sounds in your language. And your teacher doesn't tell you or doesn't reinforce at least that, oh, in English this is different and this is different and this is attached to that, or whatever it is. And so you don't get that information and you end up attaching the wrong things to other things, and you wind up with problems like this. So this is another reason why I say focus on your ears. Start with pronunciation first. There's no one perfect best way to learn a language, but this is very, very strongly recommended for a reason. Okay. Or if you're already intermediate, go back to the basics and focus on your sounds, focus on your stress, focus on your rhythm, all that stuff, especially the sounds. Have you ever watched Promised Neverland? I've heard a lot about it, haven't watched it. It's one of those anime that I'll probably eventually kind of be like, okay, fine, I'll give it a try because I'm really bored right now and I've watched all my other anime, and then I'll be like, wow, this is amazing. But I haven't got to that point yet. So, yeah. Okay, thank you for the effort and still, yeah. I need to leave early today. Oh, bye now. Okay. See you next week. By the way, I've been doing a lot of shadowing. Very good. Thank you again for making me aware of such a thing. Yes, no problem. But yes, such a thing. That is a common mistake. We want such a thing. Sorry, I had to make you wait for. Oh, I'll watch tomorrow. Okay. Yeah. So if you're already gone by, sorry, took me a second, but yes, it is such a thing. So there you go. So Steve, unknown. Oh yeah, answering unknown. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think DMC is something about copyright. Yeah, see, I think it's about copyright. And if a song has it, a YouTube reaction or a video with this song can get copyrighted or demonetized. No S there. It's not des. It's D. Demonetized. Not sure though. If you like Death Note, you should check it out. Oh, I do like Death Note. The manga was better than the anime, but yeah, Death Note was pretty cool. I've been doing shadowing, watching. In fact, my roommate actually just watched Death Note for like the first time because she's not super big on anime, but I'm kind of trying to like recommend anime to her. Like, hey, I think you like this. Hey, I think you like that. Usually I'm right, but sometimes I'll recommend one that I just really like and hoping that she'll like it, and then she doesn't like it. So, yeah. Like Shokugeki no Soma. She really liked that one. But she hasn't finished it because she doesn't watch the Japanese one. She only watches the English one, and they haven't caught up yet on Netflix. But I've been doing shadowing, watching the Kardashians. I mean, you do you, but not necessarily advised. um, yeah, I mean, you can use any material, but it kind of like, does it align with your goals, right? Because ideally you should be practicing the, yeah, like, okay, if you want to be, how do I put this? There's so many wrong ways that this could go. Whatever you want to be, that's what you should be practicing, right? Whatever you want to do, that's what you should be practicing. So, barring certain fundamentals that underpin things like basic sounds, if you want to talk like a Kardashian, then you should shadow the Kardashians. But if you don't want to talk like the Kardashians, then maybe do it here and there for fun and don't make it a large part of your focus. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just, you want to make sure it aligns with your goals, because whatever you're shadowing, right, you're putting a lot of repetition and stuff into this, and that can filter into your speech. That's the goal, is to get it to filter into your speech. So if you don't want to actually talk like that, then that's not what you want to be shadowing. It's my guilty pleasure. I just wanted an excuse to watch the show. Yeah. I'm practicing my English. Let's see what happens. Yeah, I get that. I really hate that phrase though, like, guilty pleasure. It's like, why do you have to feel guilty? I mean, I get it. Makes sense. There's a reason why the phrase exists, but like, you shouldn't feel guilty about it. Like, it is what it is. If you like watching the Kardashians, watch the Kardashians. Who cares? Um, But yeah, Steve, always that there is a T or a D in the middle of two other consonants, I can drop it. Okay, so slight rephrasing there. Whenever there is, not always that, whenever there is a T or a D in the middle of two other consonants, I can drop it, right? Okay. So always statements in English are very dangerous because there's always probably some random exception. Um, but I would say yes. And it's not because it's a T or a D. It's because of, I think I was talking about this last week, where English does not like to have three consonant sounds together, not letters in spelling, but actually three sounds. Um, we talked, I forget the examples we talked about last time. The one I always think of is bankruptcy, which is where you tell the government that you are completely poor and have nothing, and and so your finances are kind of like wiped clean. But the full pronunciation, right? The full enunciation of the word is bankruptcy. So we have the T and the S almost kind of blend. You push the S through the T, but the T and the S are both there. Bankruptcy. And instead, what English always likes to do, well, it's probably safe to say always, but you'll probably find an exception eventually. What English more or less always likes to do is it will drop that middle consonant sound, whether it's a T or not, it doesn't matter. So instead of C, we'll push the S through the P and we'll say bankruptcy. C is a lot easier to say. Another one I think we mentioned last time was asks. And this is a tricky one because you have to do the S and then do a little modulation with the air or the exact placement of your tongue and then push out another S. It's not just like one long S. But we would drop that K, right? Asks. He asks me every day. He asks me every day. And if you're speaking really quick, you can kind of just drop that last S. It's okay. But this is a similar case where we're dropping that middle sound, but it's not a T or a D, it's a K. We can still drop it. So yes, basically, that the answer would be yes. Okay, we're at 2.5 hours. We're down to 6 viewers, and it seems like the chat has really slowed down. So, any other questions? Any other comments? Topics that you wish to hear my beautiful voice talk about? That's not my words. That's other people say that apparently, and I always find it weird. But we are so close to monetization. So close. We're at 3.3 thousand watch time hours. 3.3. We need 4. So we're about 700 hours away. So very close. And as soon as we hit that number, I probably won't be monetized right away because YouTube has to like manually confirm it and make sure I didn't try to manipulate it or whatever. And that might take a while depending on how many people are needing monetization review. But as soon as I hit that number, I am going to officially start work on 2 things. Number 1 is the ear training software. I'm going to get out version 1 of that. I don't know how long it's going to take me to make because I'm not yet a programmer. Not yet, keyword, not yet. But I'm going to be teaching myself through Python, which I have a little bit of basic experience in. And I can get version 1 of that ear trainer out for you guys for free. It's going to be for free. You can donate for it if you want, but it's going to be free for everybody because, I'm just so nice. And of course, I'll continue to try to improve that over time. But the second thing I'm going to be doing at the same time is I'm going to be documenting my progress with that and starting my second YouTube channel, which is all about building any and every skill that you want to build and using the underlying map that maps all skills as a way of navigating and programming your learning. Programming, not in the sense of computers, but in the sense of making a plan. So my second YouTube channel will be started, and that one's not going to have as crazy editing. Not that I do super crazy editing for this channel, but I try to make them look good usually. For free, Rachel's English could never. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I was talking with student about that. With so like Rachel's English Academy, because he was telling me a little bit about that and his experience with that and whatever. And she has like teachers under her, then they give you feedback because obviously like she's not doing all the work. Like she is also working with students, but she can only help so many students. And I thought about maybe at some point having something kind of like that, which it would probably have to be paid because I mean, if you have other people, you have to pay those people, or even if you just have like like a big website, like you have to pay the server costs. Maybe it could be done through donation, like Wikipedia, but obviously it's a business model, right? So I don't know if I'll ever try to do something like that with English Hacks, like she's doing, but most of what I do is definitely going to be free for you guys. Like everything that I've done has been free. Like on Patreon, people on Patreon don't really get anything special. I mean, they get certain perks, but they don't get any like content that you guys don't get for free. I don't hide anything, any actual learning content behind a paywall. And when I make my ear training software, it's something that I could sell quite easily, but I'm not going to. You guys can donate, but it will be freely available. When can I drop the that? You mean the T in that? Or the word that? Because both of those would be perfectly valid questions. Because you can do both. The word. Yeah, okay. That's what I figured. That's kind of tricky. But okay. There's a 2-part answer here. There's one kind of that you can never drop, and there's another kind of that we almost always drop. Okay. So that's the easy part. If that is like this and that, right? So it's pointing to a noun, right? Like I like that car. Okay. Yes, right. So I know this, I know that, whatever it is. That like I just said that same that you cannot drop. Okay, it's used to point to something. It's this versus that. It's just part of the language. Okay. Um, if you use that to connect two clauses or two ideas, I think that is right. This is something that is very strange to Spanish speakers, and I think also to Portuguese speakers, because I'm pretty sure you guys do the same thing that Spanish does. Um, yeah, you do. So, like in Spanish, you would say like, well, they'd actually probably use creer instead of pensar, but like creo que blah 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 blah. So que is what or that, depending on the context. So creo que blah blah blah. And in Portuguese, I think you would either use pienso or creo. I'm not sure. I don't know enough Portuguese, but creo que or pienso que. Um, so it should be the same structure. In English, we have that exact same structure. However, this word that, right, if I say I think he's right, it's very clear that I'm changing subjects. It's very clear who's the subject in the first one and what that person is doing, I think. It's very clear in the second case who the subject is, he, and what I think about him, he is right. So there's no need to keep the word that there. And this will usually be clear by the context. Okay. There's actually like a whole group of grammar words that we almost always drop. And that is one of those words. There are some times, I haven't pinpointed a rule for this. Maybe you can find it online, but I haven't actually sat down and pinpointed a rule for this. But there are some times that if you don't say that between two clauses, it breaks the grammar. And I'm not sure why, but usually it's optional. And sometimes people will say it and it just comes out. I think that he's right. It could happen because it's supposed to be there, but more often than not, if we can drop it, we are going to drop it. So sometimes you'll hear it even when we can drop it because it comes out. But usually, if you hear it, it's probably going to be because it actually needs to be there, and there's a reason in that sentence. In Portuguese, you would use oh yeah, acho. That's right. Yeah, I always forget because it's so different from Spanish. Like my brain, I didn't have enough practice to grab onto that verb because it's so different. Yeah, eu acho que ele está certo. Está certo. Yeah. God, my Portuguese pronunciation is so horrible. Eu acho que ele está certo. We wouldn't normally drop the word equivalent to that. Yeah. So the main point, you know what I mean, right? The que, or que in Spanish, is there, right? You wouldn't normally drop it. So it's the opposite in English. We would normally drop it. And unfortunately, because there are some times where we can't, I can't just say, well, just don't use it. But you will be safe most of the time if you just drop it. So, I mean, maybe there's a specific rule for that online, but I haven't pinpointed that yet. Because the official grammar will tell you it's supposed to be I think that he's right, but this is real speech we're talking about. So now within that same type, some other examples of things that we do. So if we're going to say, this is also a big problem for English learners because it's so confusing, in order to do something, right? So it's like for the purpose of doing. So I am taking classes in order to become a doctor, right? I'm going to school in order to become a doctor, right? Now you can say that a different way. You can say so that I can become a doctor, or for the purpose of becoming a doctor. So there's usually more than one way to say this, but the in order part is usually dropped, right? So I'm going to school to become a doctor. And this leads to some interesting cases. Like if I say, I stop tying my shoe, okay, this means that I am tying my shoe and then I stop tying my shoe. Now I am not tying my shoe, okay? But if I say I stop to tie my shoe, this is actually I stop in order to tie my shoe, but we don't say in order. You can, but we usually don't. And this confuses a lot of English learners because they don't realize that these are two different meanings, right? Or if they do realize that it's two different meanings, they're confused why there's a different meaning. And it's actually because we're not saying the in order part. But you shouldn't drop when is followed by a verb. Like, that's the girl that ran me over. He's the guy that teaches English online. Yeah, so this is, here we go. This is the case that I was thinking of. Yes, this is when you cannot drop it. Yeah, when, oh, that's right. When it is a clausal connector for a descriptor, right? We'll put it that way. And I know that sounds very grammatical and fancy, but when I say I think he's right, we're changing subjects, right? There's I think, there's he's right, and they go together. I think he's right. Okay. And we don't have to say that because it's very clear that those two are linked. In this case, the girl that ran me over, it should actually be who ran me over, but we do commonly say that. It's perfectly fine. Or the guy that teaches English. Well, actually, sometimes you can drop this one too. It depends on the sentence structure. I'll come back to that. Here, so if you say, that's the girl that ran me over. So which girl, right? The girl that or who ran me over. Okay, so it describes the girl. And in the case of these sentences, the girl that ran me over or the guy that teaches English online, this is important information. Okay, it's very important information to describe so we know which guy and which girl. But what about this sentence? If I say, let's see here. There's a man walking on the street. In the street. I was going to say something slightly different. In the street. There's a man walking in the street. Now, this is actually, there's a man is, or you could say that is, a man who is or a man that is walking in the street. But we don't have to say the who or that. The question is why. And that's what I'm not completely sure about. And maybe there's just some grammar rule you can find online. It's like, oh, yeah, okay. But I haven't looked up the specific point, and I haven't thought enough about it to pinpoint exactly when and when you cannot do that. But if we're changing subjects, like I said in my original one, you can drop that. It doesn't really matter as long as it's clear that two clauses are together like that. With the girl that ran me over, it's two clauses, but ran me over points back to the same girl, so that links them. But then when we say there's a man that is walking, this usually happens when we have that ing verb. And I think maybe it's because the ing verb that we're allowed to drop the who is or that is. Because notice we're also dropping is, because the is implied with the ing. Now, not every time you use ing is there going to be an implied is, but in the grammar of the sentence, the is implied. Because what is he doing? He's walking, right? Or if I say walking is fun, there's no is there. That's just walking as a verb. Or as a noun in that case, a verb as a noun subject. So we're using a different part of the grammar to allow us to drop that, but also is. So this is maybe a slightly different case. So if you don't have that and you just need that as the link to the descriptor for the subject, then it seems in those cases you can't drop that. That might be the rule. So, but anyway, yeah, there's the point here is that there's special category of grammar words that, again, maybe not in all cases like we see here, but that generally in order to that, whatever, we can sort of just imply and we don't have to actually say. And in fact, it would be more common not to say. So it's much, much more common to say, I stop to tie my shoe than I stop in order to tie my shoe. So, okay. Anyway, we're at almost 3 hours. My sore, I can't talk. My throat is getting a little bit sore here. And we're down to 4 viewers now. So I think we should kind of wrap things up here. Any other questions before we go? Or anything else to say before we go? Give it a second. Let's close this. Close this. By the way, in case if anybody is interested, I'll give a random shout out to the YouTube channel, The Bioneer, if you're interested in fitness and working out. What about Start? Thank you so much for this Q&A session. You're very welcome. Yeah, I'll mention Start really quick. I was thinking about mentioning that. This is actually something I'm sorting out right now with a particular student. We're going over why certain verbs use ing and why certain verbs don't. And there's actually a reason underneath subconsciously why it makes sense. In the case of start and stop, it's relatively easy. So if I say I start tying my shoe, this is the opposite of I stop tying my shoe. So there's my shoe, it needs to be tied. I start tying it, the action starts, then I stop tying it. Okay, and it stops. So that's just the opposite. Now, if I say I start to tie my shoe, this means exactly the same thing. Why does it mean the same thing? I haven't quite gotten down to the very subconscious level that logically explains why. I'm sure there's a logical reason, but we don't actually have to go that deep. In this case, this is not short for I start in order to tie my shoe. That doesn't make any sense. Now, I can say I start something in order to do something else. But if I say I start to, then to it's just like I want to go. We talked about the logic of the preposition to. To becomes just the pointer. It makes the second verb the end point of the first verb. So this start is the same as want. I have a desire, it points to the second action. In this case, I'm starting something and it points to the action I'm starting. I start to what? Tie my shoe. Where in the case of stop, if you say I stop to tie my shoe, it can't mean that. To isn't just a pointer between stop and to. Technically, under the surface, that is still happening, but in combination with in order. Okay, and that creates a special meaning, which I will be talking about. I think that's group 6 in the book for the chapter about to. It will be in part 2 of the lesson, video lesson that is coming up in the future. But this is one thing that's confusing because they say, okay, well, start tying and start to tie mean the same thing. But then stop tying and stop to tie don't mean the same thing. So why? And the easy explanation on the surface is that stop to is stop in order to, where start to is not start in order to. The deeper question is, why is start to not start in order to? Why isn't the in order there? That's something I don't quite have an answer for, and we don't really need an answer for that. But it would be interesting to know of why that is happening. But we do know, for example, like with want, I want to go. It's not I want in order to go, right? That's a different structure. So some verbs are going to use that same structure, and they happen to be able to use the ing. We can't say I want going. So want can't use the ing there. It has to use the to. Some verbs can use both. I like eating. I like to eat. Same thing. Okay, same exact thing. By the way, the opposite, I dislike eating. I dislike to eat. Probably wouldn't say dislike to eat. It's not wrong, but we don't use dislike as much as like. Like I hate eating. I hate to eat. It's the same thing. There's no problem there. So I guess the way to look at it would be some verbs will trigger the purpose, right? I'm stopping for the purpose of tying my shoe. So if you use stop to do, it's going to mean in order because why are you stopping? If you say I start to tie my shoe, you might say, well, why are you starting? But it's that verb doesn't carry that idea. It carries the other idea like I want to do. So it's two different structures and it's stupid. At the end of the day, it's stupid. It's English. But I hope that makes sense, or it kind of makes sense, if nothing else. I don't have all the answers, guys, not yet. But as I said, the surface explanation there should be sufficient. We just don't have the deeper answer of what's really going on between the split between the two. Anyway, okay, I think we're about done. I know I'm done. So thank you guys very much. I guess there's not much else to say. I don't know. My brain's kind of dying at this point. So I will see you guys next week, hopefully, most likely. Maybe not. If not, I'll let you know. But otherwise, see you next week and have a great weekend and all that stuff. Thanks for watching. One more simple question. Oh, you barely got me. Okay, not yet. One more simple question. What's your question? What's your question? How to pronounce you know like that? You know, you know. There can be a schwa between the Y sound and the no, you know, because it's supposed to be you know. You can reduce to yeah. Okay. So you know. Usually we don't say it that way. You know, that's perfectly fine. But we can take it a step further and sort of drop that schwa because the schwa is already a super small little tiny sound that is susceptible to dropping. Or has a higher likelihood to drop compared to maybe some other sounds. And so you could it's possible to go because the Y is here at the end, you just close it. So instead of going yeah and going down into the schwa and then up to the end, you could just go yin, 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 you know, you know. And technically there might still be a tiny, tiny little bit of a schwa there, but it doesn't really matter. Like you're kind of just dropping it. So you can go straight between the two sounds. Yeah. So two ways to say it. Either way is fine. Okay, so with that, thank you very much. If you have any more comments, you can just leave them in on a random video or whatever. It doesn't matter. So, perfect. All right, see you guys next week.